Olá, sejam todos bem-vindos a essa transmissão, reação do primeiro debate a vice-presidentes dos Estados Unidos. Mike Pence, vice-presidente atual, candidato à reeleição, e Kamala Harris, a candidata do Partido Democrata, hoje vão se enfrentar. No primeiro debate serão três também como os debates presidenciais, e tal como o debate entre o Trump e o Biden, será mediado pelo Wallace e também será transmitido pela Fox News. Então o debate vai começar logo mais. E enquanto isso eu queria tratar com vocês de uma questão que já queria ter feito um vídeo, mas não tive essa oportunidade. Então aproveitar esses momentos, né, que temos antes do debate para tratarmos de o que eu chamo as ameaças dos democratas e as instituições americanas. Então é algo que pouco se fala aqui na mídia brasileira, né? Nós formos acompanhar aí o que publicam os principais jornais, nós perceberemos uma tendência, né, a valorizar a posição democrata, a falar mal do Trump, né? Enfim, bias, né, um viés pró-democrata, e não há um enfoque muito grande nas suas políticas e no que elas poderiam representar para os Estados Unidos da América, né? Então, eu queria levantar aqui três ameaças que os democratas colocaram abertamente, né, ao povo americano, né, nessa campanha, que por mais que tenham tido o tom de ameaça e sejam de fato, não tem sido tratado assim pela mídia de lá e nem reportado aqui no Brasil, né? Então vejam só, como nós tivemos a oportunidade de tratar, comentando, tanto reagindo ao debate presidencial quanto no comentário análise posterior, eu disse a vocês que uma das questões essenciais, que foi o primeiro ponto do debate do Trump e do Biden, foi justamente a questão da Suprema Corte, né, da indicação que o Trump fez de Amy Coney Barrett para ocupar a vaga até então, né, da Greta Ginsburg. Então, como ele está acabando seu mandato, a Amy Coney Barrett é uma figura originalista, né, como a gente poderia, né, é considerado lá conservador e tal. Ora, esse termo, né, abrange muita coisa nos Estados Unidos e aqui também no Brasil. Isso gerou um debate lá nos Estados Unidos, um debate público. Há a possibilidade de os republicanos perderem a maioria no Senado e há a possibilidade real de Trump não ser reeleito. Então, o que os democratas alegavam é que não poderia haver a indicação agora, porque haverá renovação, né, nas eleições, portanto seria melhor que houvesse essa indicação e a votação sobre esse nome somente em 2021. A questão é que essa foi uma mudança de postura em relação ao que eles defenderam em 2016, mas isso pouco importa, porque a política é feita disso mesmo. O fato é que virou uma questão central nas eleições, muito embora na semana passada tenha tido lá, né, a doença do Trump. Então o ciclo de notícias nos Estados Unidos é muito rápido, muito intenso, né? Então nada tem durado muito tempo nessas eleições, né? Então nós temos o corona que permanece, mas tirando isso, toda hora tem alguma coisa nova acontecendo com consequências e tal. Mas de qualquer forma, voltando a esse assunto, né, para falar dessas ameaças, nós tivemos então claramente colocada pelo líder da minoria no Senado, né, líder do Partido Democrata no Senado, Chuck Schumer, uma ameaça explícita, né, de que os democratas, caso vencessem, tivessem maioria na Câmara e no Senado em 2021, poderiam, né, aumentar o número de juízes na Suprema Corte. Então, lá nos Estados Unidos não há uma definição constitucional de quantos juízes deve haver na Suprema Corte. Atualmente são 9. Há mais de 150 anos nós temos 9 juízes na Suprema Corte. E o que está se propondo agora é colocar 2 ou até 3 a mais, né? 2 ou 4 a mais, né? Que seria para 11 ou para 13, sempre número ímpar. E o Trump, os democratas, então, estão dizendo que caso os republicanos venham, né, seguir com esse curso, e se eles tiverem a maioria, eles vão então aumentar o número de juízes para que tenham, né, a possibilidade de apontar mais 2 juízes ou mais 4 juízes e assim obter maioria, né, apontando juízes liberais, mais, digamos assim, vinculados a uma corrente, aquela ideia de que a Constituição é viva, que a Constituição se adaptada aos tempos modernos e tal, uma visão contrária do originalismo, uma visão de mais ativismo judicial, eles pudessem passar a sua pauta pela Suprema Corte, né? Então, essa ameaça colocaria, né, em perigo a legitimidade da Suprema Corte, e é algo que já foi intentado anteriormente. Então, o FDR, Franklin Delano Roosevelt, tentou fazer isso, né? Tentou passar essa pauta quando os democratas tinham maioria na Câmara e no Senado, durante, né, os 4 mandatos, quando então o Supremo Corte barrou várias das reformas do New Deal, mesmo tendo maioria, né, seu partido tendo maioria, isso foi tão mal visto à época que ele não conseguiu ir adiante. E aí esse pack the court, que é a expressão que se utiliza para falar de encher a corte, né, não foi para frente. Essa é uma primeira ameaça, né? E que, bom, se Amy Coney Barrett for aprovada, é bem possível que venha a ocorrer, dadas as condições, né? Tendo os democratas o poder suficiente para isso. A segunda ameaça se refere especificamente à condução dos negócios públicos dentro do Senado americano. Então, lá no Senado, existe uma prática dentro do regimento deles, que é a do filibuster, que é basicamente o bloqueio, né? A possibilidade de bloquear a pauta dentro da Casa Legislativa, né? Então isso foi uma construção ao longo do tempo, né? Inicialmente o filibuster, né, no início do século XIX, na verdade fim do XVIII, início do XIX, era basicamente discursos ininterruptos que acabavam por proibir na prática a discussão, a votação da lei, né? Então o que é o filibuster? É um acordo que se chegou que para se votar uma lei, ela deve ser aprovada por no mínimo 60 senadores. Um quórum qualificado, 60 é hoje, né? 60 senadores é hoje. Então, antes de se chegar a esse número, né, de quórum que tinha que votar para poder um número que tinha que aceitar a votação para então se votar na lei, o filibuster se dava, como eu disse, por discursos ininterruptos. Então, era como se os senadores nunca deixassem a fase de discussão acabar. Então, há relatos de discursos que duraram dezenas de horas, né? Então, de mais de 2 dezenas de horas, né? De senador que fica discursando, pausa, volta, discursa, justamente para bloquear a votação da lei, né? E aí, para evitar que os senadores ficassem perdendo tempo ouvindo, né, discurso, que eram feitos só para evitar, né, a votação, criou-se essa prática aí de um quórum qualificado, que hoje é 60, vota para acabar a discussão, e aí tem a votação sobre a peça legislativa. O mais interessante é que o quórum qualificado do filibuster, que é 3/5, né, voto qualificado, é maior do que boa parte das peças do quórum necessário para aprovar nomes ao judiciário ou peças legislativas. Então, uma simples maioria, né, uma maioria de 51 votos, consegue aprovar uma lei, só que eles sequer conseguem chegar a essa fase de aprovar uma lei, porque precisam de 60 votos. Então, hoje, e desde o Obama, o Senado é bem dividido, e nenhum dos partidos teve mais nenhum dos partidos chegou a 60 votos desde o Obama. Eu não vou dizer de antes porque realmente eu não tenho esses dados, mas desde então, né, essa divisão dentro do Senado tem paralisado os debates lá na Casa Alta, né? E aí qual é a grande questão? Por um lado, o filibuster emperra as discussões, mas por outro lado, ele foi utilizado como mais um mecanismo, né, de checks and balances, né, de pesos e contrapesos das instituições norte-americanas, para evitar um atropelo da maioria. Então, para dar algum poder para a minoria negociar, né, a tramitação de leis. Então, o filibuster está sendo ameaçado pelos democratas, que dizem que caso eles cheguem, né, caso eles obtenham maioria no Senado, basta a maioria no Senado, não precisa eleger o presidente nem a Câmara, eles acabariam com o filibuster para peças legislativas, né? O filibuster existia filibusters, vamos dizer assim, para outros tipos de votação. Então, por exemplo, havia o filibuster para a escolha de juízes da Suprema Corte, então tinha que ter o quórum qualificado também, mas os democratas aboliram isso quando tinham maioria no primeiro governo Obama. Se não estou enganado, no primeiro governo Obama. E aí os próprios republicanos disseram, vocês vão se arrepender disso, né? E agora estão pagando o preço, porque para acolher, né, a indicação do presidente basta 51 votos, que eles têm, né? A rigor eles têm 53 senadores, 2 já disseram que não vão votar, eles têm 51 votos, né? Então, essa é a segunda ameaça. Acabar com o filibuster significa também acabar com a garantia da minoria parlamentar, né, minoria no Senado, de obstar peças legislativas, né, que desagradem as suas bases, né? E isso sempre foi, apesar de emperrar as coisas, isso sempre foi positivo, porque forçava o executivo a negociar, né? Ou enfim, né, mesmo barrava algumas leis que teriam um impacto muito negativo, um grande impacto, né? Enfim. Bom, então essa é a segunda ameaça. E a terceira ameaça é a de criação de novos estados. Então hoje nós temos 50 estados e alguns territórios, né, nos Estados Unidos. Então a diferença do território para o estado é que o estado tem, primeiro, né, uma constituição própria, uma ampla autonomia, mas também ele tem representação na Câmara e no Senado, né? Coisa que os territórios não têm. Eles têm observadores, né? Eles mandam observadores, mas que não têm voto, né? Eles podem expor, né, ponto de vista dos cidadãos daquele território, mas não podem não podem votar, né, nenhuma matéria. Por que isso é uma ameaça? Porque os estados que eles querem criar são todos são virtualmente todos democratas, né? São estados, digamos assim, seguros para os democratas, como é Califórnia, como é Nova York, né? Pelo menos é seguro, né, desde a década de 90. Então, o que isso significaria, né, caso fossem acrescentados esses estados? E quais são, né? Vamos lá. Quais são os estados que eles querem criar? Então, o primeiro é o de Washington D.C., né? Então, transformar o distrito que abriga a capital, né, que é a capital, né, num estado. O Porto Rico, que há algum tempo, né, já tem uma reivindicação, há um grupo lá que reivindica, né, se tornar estado. E a ilha de, até aventou-se, pelo que eu já vi, a ilha de Guam também seria fortemente democrata. Então, o que impactaria? Para cada um dos estados haveria 2 novos senadores, e aí a chance, né, de estado seguro, né, de serem 2 democratas em cada um é muito grande. Eles alcançariam sempre maioria no Senado. Não, como eu disse, né, o Senado anda dividido desde Obama, pelo menos, e, portanto, um equilíbrio entre as forças que, né, estão em contenda na nação hoje. E aí, caso eles obtenham mais 6, eles sempre terão maioria. E aí, caso acabem com o filibuster, eles simplesmente vão poder atropelar toda a peça legislativa. Basta ter maioria na Câmara e no Senado, eles aprovam o que eles quiserem. Porque como eu disse, boa parte das leis lá nos Estados Unidos basta a maioria, né, 50% mais 1. Então, 50% mais 1 na Câmara dos Deputados, 50% mais 1 no Senado passa praticamente toda a peça legislativa, salvo engano, só com exceção, se eu não estiver enganado, a única exceção é a emenda constitucional, que requer quórum qualificado, se não me engano também de 3/5. Então, não é lá, ou é 2/3, algo assim. Então, somente uma emenda constitucional, né, é uma coisa muito grave, que enfim, tem toda uma dificuldade para passar, porque não só tem que passar pelo Congresso, como também tem que ser aprovado pelas assembleias estaduais, o restante da legislação, orçamento e outras peças do gênero, como por exemplo agora está sendo discutido aí o auxílio, né, o estímulo de novo, e a Nancy Pelosi está segurando, basta 50% mais um para ser aprovado. E aí você acaba com o filibuster e tem uma maioria perene por conta do acréscimo desses estados, os democratas vão comandar o Congresso, né, por bastante tempo. E aí não são só senadores, né? Tem os senadores, 2 para cada estado novo, que se fosse incorporado, mais os representantes os representantes na Câmara dos Representantes, né? A gente poderia chamar aqui de Câmara dos Deputados, seriam acrescidos baseados na população. Então eles também aumentariam a sua participação, né? Ou teriam mais segura participação na Câmara dos Representantes. Bom, então tudo isso significaria, vamos lá, né? Resumindo, back the court, né, que é aumentar o número de juízes na Suprema Corte, acabar com o filibuster, que assegura, né, um balanceio, um freio, né, ao partido no poder, e criar novos estados levaria então a um predomínio de basicamente um governo de partido único nos Estados Unidos, né? Os republicanos não teriam chance, né, de voltar, poderiam até voltar à presidência da República, mas estariam sempre em desvantagem no Senado, né? Esse é um problema. E ainda tem um quarto, né? Eu poderia acrescentar um quarto, mas que esse é um pouco mais complexo, embora também todos os pré-candidatos democratas durante as primárias falaram sobre isso. Talvez um dos pouquíssimos que agora não me recordo para dizer com certeza foi o Joe Biden, mas enfim, grande maioria dos outros pré-candidatos à época dizia que acabaria também com o colégio eleitoral. Isso é um pouco mais complexo porque o colégio eleitoral está inscrito na Constituição norte-americana. Então, para acabar efetivamente com o colégio eleitoral e estabelecer o voto direto, seria necessário uma emenda constitucional, né? Mas existe um outro meio de tornar o colégio eleitoral basicamente obsoleto, né? É por meio de votações nos estados, tá? Nas assembleias estaduais. Como assim? Existe um projeto que já está em andamento lá nos Estados Unidos, organizado por uma ONG, se não me engano, lá, e está tentando criar, ir, digamos, por detrás, né, pular o colégio eleitoral, que é basicamente passar leis nos 50, ou em grande parte dos estados, numa quantidade suficiente que chegue a 270 delegados, não, estados que somados deem 270 delegados, que é a seguinte proposta. Então, o estado alteraria sua legislação eleitoral, porque lá os estados têm ampla autonomia, né, sobre questões eleitorais, como distribuir seus delegados, né, se vai, como por exemplo, né, Nebraska e o Maine dividem os seus delegados por distritos, né, que é uma peculiaridade deles, enquanto os outros estados não, mas enfim, a Flórida vai contando votos à medida que eles vão chegando e não só no final. Tem estado que permite a votação muito tempo antes da data, por correio, outros que só 15 dias antes, então tem ampla autonomia. Essa peça legislativa, se aprovada nas assembleias estaduais, faria o seguinte: atrelaria os delegados do estado ao vencedor do voto popular. Então vamos supor, Califórnia. Né? Califórnia é fortemente democrata, é uma fortaleza democrata, é o estado com maior quantidade de delegados, são 55. E aí, vamos supor, né, que um candidato republicano obtenha a maioria no voto popular. Então, os 55 estados delegados normalmente iriam para os democratas, porque, né, lá é um bastião democrata, Por essa lei, como os republicanos tiveram maioria no voto, né, no voto direto, seriam então transferidos para o republicano. Então, isso na prática instalaria o voto direto, né, nos Estados Unidos, já que o voto, ele que ganhasse, né, o voto popular, teria sempre a maioria no colégio eleitoral, né? Então, isso já está em andamento. Até a última vez que eu vi, eles já tinham obtido assinatura de estados que somavam cento e poucos delegados, então eles estavam aí quase uns 50%, né, do caminho. E se um presidente, né, chegar com essa proposta, ou apoiar essa proposta, uma Câmara, a Câmara dos Representantes, o próprio Senado, apoiar essa proposta, eles sequer vão ter que passar uma emenda constitucional, né? Não precisaria ter o desgaste, porque uma emenda constitucional não só tem, como eu disse, tem um quórum qualificado nas câmaras, mas também exige a aprovação das assembleias estaduais, exige a aprovação de 3/5 das assembleias estaduais. Então tem que passar em vários estados e os estados republicanos possivelmente barrariam essa proposta. Então, nesse sentido, passar ao largo, né, do colégio eleitoral por meio dessa legislação nos estados é um caminho mais seguro para acabar com o colégio. Como os republicanos, desde o Bush, têm perdido o voto popular, isso poderia também significar um predomínio democrata por algum tempo na Casa Branca, né? Para além, como eu disse, de um predomínio no Senado e na Câmara, com o acréscimo, né, dos estados, Porto Rico, Washington D.C. e quem sabe talvez até Guam, e até mesmo a Suprema Corte, aumentando o número de juízes que servem por toda a vida, né? Vale lembrar, eles ficam por toda a vida. E duraria esse predomínio liberal na Suprema Corte por décadas, né, possivelmente. Então são ameaças, todas ameaças democratas. Pouco se fala que podem mudar substancialmente, né, as instituições políticas nos Estados Unidos, certo? Bom, a moderadora, acabei de ver aqui, a moderação não vai ser feita pelo Wallace, como da vice-presidencial, vai ser feita por uma mulher que eu conheço, um jornalista que eu não conheço. Ela já se sentou à mesa, já a gente vai iniciar o debate então. Bem, vamos então agora para falar do debate e esperar, né? Então nós temos aí um debate cheio de consequências, ganhou muito mais importância do que teria normalmente, um debate entre candidatos a vice-presidente, porque o Trump com o Covid, né, teve que dar uma pausa nos sua campanha presidencial, né, nos comícios que ele fazia nos estados contenciosos, né, os battleground states, e isso impacta diretamente a campanha, né? Ele tinha esse estilo, né, de ir a campo, encontrar com as pessoas. Doente, ele não pode fazer isso, suspende pelo menos por mais uma semana, no mínimo, por mais essa semana inteira, e um pedaço da outra, sua campanha, até ele ser liberado pelos médicos da Casa Branca. E por outro lado, existe a possibilidade de um segundo debate presidencial, que, salvo engano, seria, né, na semana seguinte a esse debate dos vices. É possível que esse debate entre Trump e o Biden, esse segundo, seja cancelado. Então, esse dos vice-presidentes ganha mais peso, já que então aqui que nós poderíamos ver expostas as propostas do Partido Republicano e do Partido Democrata. O estilo dos dois, tanto do Pence quanto da Harris, bem diverso do Trump e do Biden, né? Então, primeiro, eles são mais jovens do que os candidatos a presidente. Segundo, que tem temperamentos bem diversos, né? Então, Pence é uma figura muito mais calma, ele foi governador, ele já teve experiência parlamentar, foi governador de Indiana, é uma figura que fala com tranquilidade, que é bem diferente do Trump, ele não fica interrompendo. Então vai ser bem menos enérgico nesse sentido. Então vai ser um debate bem mais calmo, né? Mais civilizado, se a gente for dizer assim. Pouco provável que o Pence venha ficar interrompendo, embora a Harris é um pouquinho mais enérgica. Ela interrompe mais, ela fala mais, e ela tenta demonstrar, né, mais força e tal. Bom, então esse é um ponto. No segundo, nós temos aí, né, o que eu acho que a gente pode esperar, talvez, um ataque às posições conservadoras do Pence, porque ele é uma figura muito religiosa, ele é cristão convicto, e é bem conservador nos seus próprios costumes, na sua própria vida, e tentou, quando foi governador de Indiana, cercear ao máximo o aborto, né? Não pode proibir por conta da legislação federal, ou melhor, na legislação, né? Da decisão da Suprema Corte, do Roe v. Wade, né? Que determinou que os estados não poderiam proibir o aborto, né? Colocando o aborto então como um direito. Então ele não poderia proibir quando foi governador de Indiana, mas ele tentou cercear ao máximo e teve um backlash, assim, né, na época. Então é possível que a Harris tente acentuar um pouco esse aspecto, tá, é possível, vamos ver. Mas sem dúvida, né, o tema que a Harris vai bater mais, isso eu apostaria, né, é a questão do coronavírus, porque o Pence... bom, primeiro porque eles falam isso o tempo inteiro do Trump, agora que ele pegou Covid então, e toda a posição dele sobre máscaras, né, acaba prejudicando a posição, né, dos republicanos, e ele, como vice-presidente, vai acabar tendo que responder pelo, né, o cabeça de chapa, mas também pelo fato de que o Pence foi o líder, chefiou o grupo de resposta ao coronavírus nos Estados Unidos. Então, quando Trump, né, quando começou essa pandemia, tal, né, quando começou a ganhar proporções elevadas, Trump criou uma comissão. Essa comissão é chefiada ainda pelo Pence, né, que realizava então, realiza, né, reuniões frequentes com cientistas e, enfim, vários outros especialistas para tomar decisões, né, então, para orientar, enfim, decisões, aconselhar. E por conta desse aspecto, a Harris é bem possível que venha focar bastante, né, no coronavírus, tentando imputar a ele e ao Trump, né, as 210 mil mortes lá no país. Por outro lado, o Pence tem mais conhecimento, né, pessoal sobre a questão, né. Ele participou dessas reuniões, então ele deve ter os dados e conhecimento sobre outras coisas, como se deram os fatos, né? Primeira mão, pode contra-argumentar, vamos dizer assim, mais facilmente a sua oponente, né? Já no caso, o que o Pence pode colocar, né, em questão da Harris é o fato de ela ter sido considerada em 2019 pelo Washington Post, se não estou enganado, a senadora mais liberal, e aí liberal lá no sentido de mais progressista, do Senado. Então, ela foi considerada a senadora mais progressista do ano de 2019, barrou, portanto, o próprio Bernie Sanders, que se autoproclama social-democrata. Na verdade, não é nem social-democrata, é um socialista democrático, porque social-democrata é outra coisa. Então, ele se coloca como socialista abertamente. Ela venceu ele, portanto. Ela tem posturas não claras e nem coerentes sobre a lei e a ordem, né, sobre a questão do crime. Então ela foi procuradora, a gente pode dizer assim, do estado da Califórnia. Enquanto foi procuradora, supostamente foi dura nas suas condenações, mas há vários escândalos sobre esse período dela na, pode dizer, procuradoria, né? De casos que ela teria encoberto e outros que ela teria ido longe demais, né, na acusação. E agora ela mudou, né, flipou e foi pro lado leniente com o crime, né, com a proposta democrata mais aberta e a reformas como o sistema penitenciário, carcerário e também, digamos, minorando, né, os protestos violentos que ocorreram desde a morte do George Floyd. Então, o debate começou. Vamos acompanhar aqui, então.
We have a small and socially distant audience, and we've taken extra precautions during this pandemic. Among
Isso
other
aí,
things,
dizendo
everyone in the
das
audience is required to
precauções.
wear a face mask, and the candidates will be seated 12 feet apart. The audience is enthusiastic about their candidates, but they've agreed to express that enthusiasm only twice, at the end of the debate and now, when I introduce the candidates. Please welcome California Senator Kamala Harris and Vice President Mike Pence.
Pence e Harris.
Thank you.
Eles têm um vidro entre eles, que foi uma coisa meio nada a ver.
Senator Harris and Vice President Pence, thank you for being here. We're meeting as President Trump and the First Lady continue to undergo treatment in Washington after testing positive for COVID-19. We send our thoughts and prayers to them for their rapid and complete recovery and for the recovery of everyone afflicted by the coronavirus. The two campaigns and the Commission on Presidential Debates have agreed to the ground rules for tonight. I'm here to enforce them on behalf of the millions of Americans who are watching. One note, no one in either campaign or at the Commission or anywhere else has been told in advance what topics I'll raise
Porque
or
nenhum,
what questions I'll
nenhum
ask.
tópico foi passado com
This
antecedência.
90-minute debate will be divided into
1h30,
9 segments of
9
about 10 minutes.
segmentos.
I'll begin a segment by posing a question to each of you.
Cada
Sometimes the same
segmento
question,
vai
sometimes a
iniciar com uma
different
pergunta.
question on the same topic. You will then have 2 minutes to answer without interruption by me or the other candidate.
2 minutos para
Then
responder.
we'll take 6 minutes or so to discuss the
E a
issue.
discussão aberta,
At
no
that
estilo
point,
do primeiro
although there will
debate.
always be more to say, we'll move on to the next topic. We want a debate that is lively, but Americans also deserve a discussion that is civil.
A discussão
These are
civil,
tumultuous times,
dentro
but we
do
can and will have a
debate seja
reflective
civilizado.
exchange about the big issues facing our nation. Let's begin with the ongoing pandemic that has cost our country so much.
Começar com a pandemia.
Senator Harris, the coronavirus is
Pergunta
not
para
under
Harris.
control. Over the past week, Johns Hopkins reports that 39 states have had more COVID cases over the past 7 days than in the week before. 9 states have set new records. Even if a vaccine is released soon, the next administration will face hard choices. What would a Biden administration do in January and February that a Trump administration wouldn't do? Would you
O que uma
impose
administração
new lockdowns
Biden-Harris
for businesses and schools and
teriam
hotspots?
feito em janeiro e
federal
fevereiro
mandate
que o
to wear
Trump não
masks?
fez.
You have 2 minutes to respond without interruption.
Thank you, Susan. Well, the American people have witnessed what is the greatest failure of any presidential administration in the history of our country.
A maior falha da administração na história dos Estados Unidos, ela disse.
210,000 dead people in our country.
210
for
mil
the last several
mortos,
months. Over 7 million people who have contracted this
7
disease.
milhões de infectados,
1 in 5 businesses closed.
em cada 5 negócios
looking at
fechados.
Frontline workers who have been treated like sacrificial workers. We are looking at over 30 million people who in the last several months had to file for unemployment.
30 milhões
And
que
here's the thing.
pediram auxílio-desemprego.
On January 28th, the vice president and the president were informed about the nature of this pandemic. They were
Em
informed that it's
28 de
lethal
janeiro,
in consequence,
eles já
that it
sabiam
is
que
airborne,
era um
that it will
vírus
affect young
terrível, né?
people, and that it would be
Perigoso.
contracted because it is airborne.
Era passado pelo
And
ar.
they knew what was happening and they didn't tell
Eles
you.
sabiam e não
Can
falaram
you
para o povo
imagine
americano.
if you knew on January 28th, as opposed to March 13th, what they knew, what you might have done to prepare? They knew and they covered it up. The president said it was
cobriram.
a hoax. They minimized the seriousness of it. The president said, you're on one side of his ledger if you wear a mask, you're on the other side of his ledger if you don't. And in spite of all of that, today they still don't have a plan.
Eles não têm um plano
They
até
still
agora,
don't have
apesar
a
de
plan.
tudo
Well, Joe
isso.
Biden does. And our plan is about what we need to do around a national strategy for contact tracing, for testing, for
Tendo
administration
exposto o
of
plano
the vaccine, and making sure that it will be free for all.
a
That is
fazer
the
a
plan that
vacina,
Joe
acelerar,
Biden
mas o
has
Trump
and that
não.
I have, knowing that we have to get a hold of what has been going on.
Ela seria de graça,
We need to
supostamente. Quero
save
saber
our
como é que eles
country.
fazem isso.
And Joe Biden is the best leader to do that, and frankly, this administration has forfeited
Thank you,
Ele é o
Senator.
right to
melhor.
re-election based on this.
Biden é o
Thank you,
melhor
Senator
líder e tal.
Harris. Vice President Pence, more than 210,000 Americans have died of COVID-19 since February. The U.S. death toll as a percentage of our population is higher than that of almost every other wealthy nation on
Ah,
earth.
a
For instance,
percentual
our
de
death
mortes
rate
nos Estados
is 2.5
Unidos
times that
maior do
of
que
Canada
qualquer
next
outro
door.
país
You
envolvido
head
no mundo.
the administration's coronavirus task force.
Liderou a
Why is the U.S. death
grupo,
toll
né?
as a percentage of our population higher than that of almost every other wealthy country?
E a porcentagem
You
é
have
maior
2 minutes to respond without
em
interruption.
outros países.
Susan, thank you. And I want to thank the Commission and the University of Utah for hosting this event. And Senator Harris, it's a privilege to be on the stage with you. And our nation has gone through a very challenging time this year. But I want the American people to know that from the very first day, President Donald Trump has put the health of America first.
Está dizendo que desde o primeiro dia o Trump colocou à frente a saúde dos Estados
All
Unidos.
people who had returned from China.
Primeiros casos
President
depois
Donald
do
Trump did
pessoal
what
que
no other
voltou
American president had ever
da
done.
China, fez o
And
que
that was he
ninguém fez.
suspended all travel from China, the
Fez todas as
second
viagens
largest
da
economy
China,
in the world.
logo em janeiro.
Now, Senator Joe Biden opposed that decision.
Joe Biden se
He said
opôs a
it was
essa,
xenophobic and
a
hysterical.
isso, dizendo que era
But I can
xenofóbico.
tell you, having led the White House Coronavirus Task Force, that that decision alone by President Trump bought us invaluable time to stand up the greatest national mobilization since World
E
War
essa,
II.
essa suspensão dos voos deu tempo para poder organizar a resposta dos
Because with
Estados
that
Unidos.
time, we were able to reinvent testing. More than 115 million tests have been done to date. We were
Eles
able to
conseguiram
see
fazer
the
novos
delivery of
testes, 115
billions
milhões,
of
o maior do
supplies so our
mundo,
doctors and nurses had the resources support they needed.
organizar os
we
recursos
began
para os
really
médicos e
before the
enfermeiros.
month of February was out to develop a vaccine and to develop medicines and therapeutics that have been saving lives all along the way. And under President
Tiveram a
Trump's
produção
leadership,
desde então,
Operation
desde
Warp Speed,
fevereiro,
we believe we'll have literally
vacinas e
tens of
terapia
millions of
para
doses of
essa.
vaccine before the end of this year. The
Espera
reality
até o
is, when
final
you
do
look at
ano.
the Biden plan, it reads an awful lot like what
E
President Trump
parece
and I
que
and
o
our task
plano
force
do
have been
Biden
doing
parece
every
muito o que
step
não
of the way.
fizeram
I mean, quite frankly,
até agora.
when I look at their plan that talks about advancing testing, creating new PPE, developing a vaccine,
Fala de tudo que eles fizeram.
looks a
Vacina,
little bit like
testes.
plagiarism, which is
Parece
something Joe
plágio.
Biden knows a little bit about.
E o Joe
I think the
Biden
American
faz
people
muito
know
isso.
that this is a president who has put the
Thank you,
health
Vice
of America first, and the American people, I believe with my heart, can be
Thank you, Vice
proud of the
President.
sacrifices they have made. It's saved
Thank you,
countless
Mr.
American
President.
lives.
Senator Harris, would you
Oh.
like to respond?
Absolutely. Whatever the vice president is claiming the administration has done, clearly it hasn't worked.
Diz que
When
isso,
you're
o
looking
que
at
eles
over
fizeram não deu certo.
210,000 dead bodies in our country, American lives that have been lost, families that are
E
grieving.
quer que eles, né, seja o que eles fizeram não deu certo.
And you know,
Nada que eles fizessem
the
impedir a
vice
morte das
president
pessoas.
is the head of the task force and knew on January 28th how serious this was. And then thanks to Bob Woodward, we learned that they knew about it. And then when that was exposed, the vice president said, when asked, well, why didn't y'all tell anybody? He said, because the president wanted people to remain calm.
Well, let's get
So I
about-
no, but Susan, this is important.
Susan, I
I
have
want to
to
add,
weigh
but
in
if,
here.
Mr. Vice President, I'm speaking.
I have to
I'm
weigh
speaking.
Yeah, you can
So
have
I
15 more
wanna-
seconds, and then we'll give the Vice President
Thank
a
you.
chance to
So I
respond.
want to ask the American people, how calm were you when you were panicked about where you're going to get your next roll of toilet paper? How calm were you when your kids were sent home from school and you didn't know when they could go back? How calm
Thank
were
you.
you
Thank
when
you,
your
Senator
children
Harris.
couldn't see your parents because you were afraid they could kill them?
Let's give Vice President Pence a chance to respond. Vice President Pence, you have 1 minute to
You know,
respond.
there's not a day gone by that I haven't thought of every American family that's lost a loved one.
Passa um dia sem que ele pense sobre as pessoas que perderam alguém.
And in our prayers. But when you say what the American people have done over these last 8 months hasn't worked, that's a great disservice to the sacrifices the American people have made.
I'm referring
The
to
reality,
president.
if I may finish, Senator, the reality is Dr. Fauci said everything that he told the president in the Oval Office, the president told the American people.
O
Now, President
Fauci
Trump, I will
falou
tell
pro
you, has
Trump, Trump
boundless confidence
disse
in the American people, and he always spoke with confidence that we'd get through this together. But when you say it hasn't worked,
quando ela disse que não
Dr.
funcionou
Fauci
nada,
and Dr. Birx and our medical experts came to us in the second week of March. They said if the president didn't take the unprecedented step
os médicos disseram
of
que se
shutting
o
down
Trump não
roughly
tivesse
half the
feito
American economy, that we could
ele
lose
fez,
2.2 million
até 2 milhões de pessoas teriam
Americans.
morrido.
But that's the reality.
Thank you.
They also
Thank you,
said
Vice
to us if we
President
did
Pence.
everything right, Susan, we could still lose more than 200,000 Americans.
Ainda que fosse
Vice
tudo
President,
feito,
One life
200 mil
lost
pessoas
is
teriam
still many,
morrido.
Susan. But the American people, I believe, deserve credit for the
O povo americano
sacrifices that they've made
merece o crédito
for their family and their
pelo sacrifício que eles
neighbors,
fizeram.
our doctors, our nurses, our first
Thank you, Vice
responders.
President Pence.
And I'm going to speak up on behalf of what the American people have done.
Vice President Pence, you were your administration and congressional officials. No social distancing, few masks, and now a cluster of coronavirus cases among those who were there. How can you expect Americans to follow the administration's safety guidelines to protect themselves from COVID
Vamos esperar
when
que
you
as
at the White
pessoas
House
sigam
have not been doing so?
as orientações da Casa Branca quando eles
Well,
não
the American people
seguem.
have demonstrated over the last 8 months that when given the facts, they're willing to put the health of their families and their neighbors and people they don't even know first.
O povo americano escolhe,
President Trump and I have great confidence in
toma as
the
decisões
people
importantes.
and their
E
ability
a
to
administração
take that information and put it into
acredita no povo
practice.
americano
In the height
para
of the
tomar as
epidemic,
decisões.
when we were losing a heartbreaking number of 2,500 Americans a day, we surged resources to New Jersey and New York.
No pico da pandemia, eles mandaram recursos para as cidades principais. Eles são todos democratas, por sinal.
This summer, again, Americans stepped forward. But the reality is the work of the President of the United States goes on. A vacancy on the Supreme Court of the United States has come upon us, and the President introduced Judge Amy Coney
Yes,
Barrett.
thank you. Thank you, Vice
But
President
at
Pence.
that, if I may say, that Rose Garden event, there's been a great deal of speculation about it. My wife Karen and I were there and honored to be there. Many of the people who were at that event, Susan, actually were tested
Yes.
for coronavirus, and it was an outdoor event, which all of our scientists regularly and routinely advise. The difference here is President Trump and I trust the American people
A diferença é que diz que
to
o
make
Trump e ele
choices in the best interest of
confiam
their
nos,
health.
nos
Joe Biden
cidadãos
and
para
Kamala
tomar
Harris
as decisões.
consistently
Não
talk
o
about
governo.
mandates, and not just mandates with the coronavirus, but a government takeover of health care,
Thank you. Thank
the
you, Vice
Green New
President Pence.
Deal, all government control. We're about freedom and respecting the freedom of the American people.
Eles são pela liberdade e a liberdade do povo americano.
You respect
Não
the
sobre o
American
governo
people when
fazer
you tell
tudo.
them the truth. You respect the American people when you have the courage
Which we've
to be a
always
leader
done.
speaking of those things that you may not want people to hear, but they need to hear so they can protect themselves. But this administration stood on
Respeita-se o povo
information that
americano
if you
quando se
had as a parent,
fala-se a
if you
verdade.
had as a worker knowing you didn't have enough money saved up, and now you're standing in a food line because of the ineptitude of an administration that was unwilling to speak the truth to the American people. So let's talk about caring about the
Que
American people.
a justiça
The
foi
American people
inepta
had to sacrifice far too much because of the incompetence
e a
of this
população
administration. It is
americana
asking too
sacrificou
much of the
demais.
We
people.
talk
No,
about
Vice
It is
President
asking too much of the people.
Look-
That they would not be equipped with the information they need to help themselves to protect
Susan,
their
the
parents
President-
and
No,
their
I'm sorry.
children.
Kamala Harris, Senator Harris, I'm sorry.
It's
I
fine,
meant
I'm
to say-
Kamala.
No, you're Senator Harris to me. For life to get back to normal, Dr. Anthony Fauci and other experts say that
Pra
most
vida
of the
voltar ao
people who
normal,
can be vaccinated need to be vaccinated.
a maioria
But
das
half of
pessoas precisam ser
Americans now say they
vacinadas.
wouldn't take a vaccine.
E metade da
for these
população
reasons
diz
now.
que
If
tomaria a
the Trump
vacina agora.
administration approves a vaccine before or after the election, should Americans take it, and would you take it?
Se
If the public health
houver uma
professionals, if
vacina,
Dr. Fauci, if the
ela se
doctors
vacinaria.
tell us that we should take it, I'll be the first in line to take it. Absolutely. But if Donald Trump tells us that we should take it, I'm not taking it.
Que ela disse que se for o Dr.
Vice
Fauci e os
President Pence,
cientistas,
there
ela
have been a lot of
tomaria, mas
repercussions from this
ou o Trump que
pandemic.
falar,
In
ela
recent
não vai
days,
tomar
the
não, nem
president's
dizer para as
diagnosis
pessoas
of
tomarem.
COVID-19 has underscored the importance of the job that you hold and that you are seeking. That's our second topic tonight. It's the role of the vice president.
O papel do vice-presidente é o segundo tópico.
One of you will make history on January 20th. You will be the vice president to the oldest president the United States has ever had. Donald Trump will be 74 years old on
Eles serão os
inauguration day.
vice-presidentes
Joe Biden will
dos
be
presidentes mais
78 years
idosos da
old.
história dos Estados
That
Unidos.
already has raised concerns among some voters, concerns that have been sharpened by President Trump's hospitalization in recent days.
Levantou preocupações do povo
Vice
americano
President
sobre
Pence,
a
have you had a
vice-presidência.
conversation or reached an agreement with President Trump about safeguards or procedures when it comes to the issue of presidential disability? And if not,
Ele já
do you
conversou
think
com o
you should?
presidente
You have
Trump
2 minutes without interruption.
Well, Susan,
como fazer
thank
uma
you.
transição
I would like
caso
to
haja
go
alguma
back
coisa, né?
I think we need to move on
well,
to the
thank
issue
you,
of
but I would like to
vice
go back
presidency.
because the reality is that we're
Voltou ao
going to
ponto.
have a vaccine, Senator, in
vacina.
record time, in unheard of time, in less than a year. We have 5 companies in phase 3 clinical trials.
Eu acompanho isso na última fase.
Tens of millions of doses. So,
Produz agora dezenas de milhões de vacinas.
continue to undermine public confidence in a vaccine.
Ela está diminuindo a confiança na vacina.
The Trump administration, I think, is unconscionable. And Senator, I just ask you, stop playing politics with people's lives.
Para de fazer política com a vida das pessoas.
We will have a vaccine, we believe, before the end of this year. And it will have the capacity to save countless American lives.
Eles terão vacina pronta e poderá salvar de milhares.
Undermining of confidence in a vaccine is just, it's just unacceptable. And let me also say,
inaceitável diminuir a
the
confiança
reality is when you talk about
produção de
failure in
vacinas.
this administration, we actually do know what failure looks like in a pandemic. It was 2009. The swine flu arrived in the United States. Thankfully, it ended up not being as lethal as the coronavirus. But before the end of the year,
Está falando da gripe suína, que foi fracasso.
Not 7.5 million people contracted the swine flu. 60 million Americans.
60 milhões de americanos contraíram gripe suína. E que se fosse tão letal, em 2009, 2 milhões de americanos poderiam ter morrido. Chief of Staff foi de sorte. Eles fizeram tudo possível e errado.
They left the strategic national stockpile empty. They left an empty and hollow plan, but we still learned from it. And I think the American people, I'm going to say again, can be proud of what we have done. And Senator, please stop undermining confidence in a vaccine.
Senator Harris, let me ask you the same question that I asked Vice President Pence, which is, have you had a conversation or
Já
reached
teve uma
an agreement
conversa,
with Vice
ou
President Biden
teve acordo com
about
Biden
safeguards or procedures when it
sobre
comes to the
procedimentos
issue of presidential disability?
para
And if not, and if you win the
capacidade
election next
presidencial?
month, do you
E se
think
não,
you should? You have 2
ela
minutes
deveria
on
ter
the
essa
clock.
conversa.
So let me tell you, first of all, the day I got the call from Joe Biden, it was actually a Zoom call, asking me to serve with him on this ticket was probably one of the most memorable days of my life.
Um dos mais memoráveis quando ela foi convidada.
I thought about my mother.
Agora vem emocional. A questão
Came
da
to the
mãe
United
dela.
States at the age of 19, gave birth to me at the age of 25.
A mãe dela veio da
At
Índia.
Tiger Hospital in Oakland, California. And the thought that I'd be sitting here right now, I know would make her proud. And she must be looking down on me.
Grande coisa, não respondeu agora, né?
You know,
Pence
Joe
também
and I
falando
were
outra
raised
coisa.
in a very similar way. We were raised with values that are about hard work, about
Falando de que o
the
Biden e
value and
ela
dignity of public
foram
service,
criados do mesmo jeito.
and about the importance of
Valores,
fighting for the dignity of all people. And I think
Importância de lutar
Joe
pela
asked me to
dignidade das
serve with him
pessoas.
because, you know, I have a career that included being elected the first woman district attorney of San Francisco, where I created models of innovation for law enforcement.
A primeira mulher a ser eleita, né, procuradoria lá
The first
do
woman of color and
Califórnia.
black woman to be elected
Primeira
Attorney General of the state of California, where I ran the
mulher
second
de
largest
cor
Department of
a
Justice in the
conseguir o
United
cargo.
States, second only to the United States Department of Justice. And there I took on everything from transnational criminal organizations to the big banks that were taking advantage of
Agora ela
homeowners,
não
to
responde a
for-profit
pergunta.
colleges that were taking advantage of veterans. And then, of course, now I serve in the United States Senate as only the second black woman ever elected to the United States Senate. I serve on the Senate Intelligence
senadora
Committee,
de
where I've
cor,
been in
no
regular
Senado
receipt
dos
of
Estados Unidos.
classified information about threats to our nation and hotspots around the world. I've traveled the world. I've met with our soldiers in war
Viajou o
zones.
mundo contra os
And I think Joe has
soldados.
asked me to serve with him because
O
he knows
Biden
that we
pediu para
share,
elas
we
serviço.
share a purpose, which is
compartilham
about lifting up the
propósito.
American people. And after the 4 years that we have seen of Donald Trump unifying our country around
Uniu
our
o povo
common
americano.
values and principles.
Thank you,
Mas de
Senator
comuns,
Harris.
mas não
You know,
fala.
neither President Trump nor Vice President Biden has released a sort of detailed health information that had become the modern norm until the 2016 election. And in recent days, President Trump's doctors have given misleading answers or refused to answer
Nenhum
basic
dos dois
questions about his health. And my question
mostrou
to each of you
como
in
estão de
turn
saúde, né?
is this information
Saúde
voters
pessoal de cada
deserve to know?
Se os
Vice President
eleitores
Pence, would you like to go first?
Well,
têm o direito de saber
Susan,
isso.
thank you. And let me say, on behalf of the President and the First Lady, how moved we've all been by the outpouring of prayers and concern for the president. And I do believe it's emblematic of the prayers and the
Mas
concern
está
and
agradecendo
for
pelas
every American impacted by the coronavirus.
orações e
But the
bons
care the
desejos aos
president
Estados Unidos.
received at Walter Reed Hospital, the White House doctors, was exceptional. And the transparency that they practiced all along the way will continue. The American people have a right
Médicos
to
foram
know about the health
transparentes,
and well-being of their
saúde
president,
do Trump.
and will continue to do that. But I'm just extremely grateful and was more than a little moved by the broad and bipartisan support. And Senator, I want to thank you and Joe Biden for your expressions of genuine concern. And I also want to congratulate you, as I did on that phone call, on the historic nature of your nomination.
Thank you.
Está congratulando a Kamala Harris por ter sido nomeada presidente, candidata a vice-presidente.
We've got an election before the American people in the midst of this challenging year, and the stakes have never been higher. But I think the choice has never been clearer.
I want to give Senator Harris a chance to respond to the same question I asked, which is, do voters have a right to know more detailed health
Eleitores
information
têm
about
direito de
presidential
saber
candidates, and especially about
saúde, né,
presidents,
dos candidatos a
especially
presidente?
when they're facing some kind of
Mesma
challenge?
pergunta para o Pence que não respondeu,
And
né?
that's why Joe Biden has been so incredibly transparent, and certainly by
Que, com
contrast,
certeza,
the president has not. Both
o Biden foi
in terms of health
transparente.
records, but also let's look at taxes. We now know, because of great investigative journalism, that Donald Trump paid $750 in taxes. When I first heard about it, I literally said, "You mean $750,000?" And it was like, "No, $750." We now know
Agora ela foi
Donald
para
Trump
os
owes
impostos
and is in debt
do
for $400
Donald
million.
Trump.
And just so everyone
Está
is
dizendo
clear,
que ele
when
está
you say in debt, it
devendo
means you owe money to somebody.
400
And it'd be
milhões de
really good
dólares
to
em
know who the president of
débito.
the United States, the commander-in-chief, owes money to, because the
Para
American
quem que ele está
people have
devendo dinheiro,
right
né?
to know what is influencing the president's decisions, and is he making those
Ele está
decisions
influenciando
on
as
the best
decisões
interest of
do
the American people, of
presidente.
you, or self-interest? So,
E
Susan,
por
I'm glad
interesse
you asked
próprio,
about transparency, because it has to be
ou
across the board. Joe has been incredibly transparent over many, many years. The one thing we all know
que o
about
Joe
Joe,
Biden foi
he puts
transparente
it all out there. He is honest, he is
o tempo
forthright.
todo, a vida toda.
But Donald Trump, on the other hand,
Susan.
has been about
Trump não é.
covering up everything.
Thank you, Senator Harris. I want to give you a
Trump
chance to
encobriu
respond.
tudo
Vice
na vida
President.
dele.
Well, look, I respect the fact that Joe Biden spent 47 years in public life. I respect your public service as well.
Thank you.
The American people have a president who's a businessman, he's a job creator, who's
Trump
paid
foi criador de
tens of
empregos,
millions of
foi
dollars in
empreendedor,
taxes,
milhões em
payroll taxes, property taxes. He's created tens of
Postos de
thousands of American
propriedade,
jobs.
folha
The president
salarial,
said those public reports are not accurate.
e
And the president's also
foi dito
released
não é
literally stacks of financial disclosures the American people can review just as the law allows. But the distinction here is that Joe Biden, 47 years in public
Isso é.
service, compared
Joe
to
Biden,
President Donald
47 anos de
Trump, who
serviço
brought all of
público,
that
Trump
experience 4 years ago
Thank you,
and
Vice President.
turned this economy around by cutting
melhorou a
taxes, rolling
economia
back
dos Estados Unidos,
regulations,
trouxe
Thank you,
unleashing
a
Vice
experiência
President.
dele de empreendedor
fighting for
para a
free and fair
economia.
trade, and all of that's
Thank you,
on the
Vice
line
President
if
Pence.
Joe Biden and Kamala Harris.
You know, that's a good
White.
segue into our third
great
topic,
segue.
which is
Terceiro
about the
tópico.
economy. This has been another aspect
Economia
of
agora.
life for Americans that's been so affected by this coronavirus. We have a jobs crisis brewing. On Friday, we learned that the unemployment rate had declined to 7.9% in September, but the job
Emprego
growth had stalled, and that was before the latest round
Caiu a
of layoffs and furloughs
7,9%.
in the airline industry at Disney and elsewhere. Hundreds of thousands of discouraged workers have stopped looking for work.
E
Nearly 11
milhares de
million
trabalhadores
jobs that
deixaram de
existed
procurar
at the beginning
emprego.
of the year haven't been replaced.
Muitos
Those hardest
empregos
hit
não
include
foram
Latinos, Blacks, and women. Senator Harris, the
criados, né?
Biden-Harris campaign has proposed new programs to boost the economy, and you would pay for that new spending by raising $4 trillion in taxes on
Aqui o
wealthy
plano do
individuals
Biden da
and
Harris aumenta
corporations.
4 trilhões em
Some
impostos.
economists warn that could curb entrepreneurial ventures that
Isso
fuel
diminuiria,
growth
né, a
and create
iniciativa
jobs. Would raising taxes
novos
put the
empreendimentos.
recovery at risk? And you have 2 minutes to answer.
Aumentar,
uninterrupted.
perguntando se aumentar os impostos seria a saída.
On the issue of the economy, I think there couldn't be a more fundamental difference between Donald Trump and Joe Biden.
Não tem
Joe
diferença
Biden
maior do que na
believes you
economia.
measure the health and the strength of America's economy based on the health and the strength of the American worker
O
and the
Joe
American
Biden olha
family.
para os trabalhadores,
On the other hand, you have Donald Trump, who measures the strength of the economy based on how rich people are doing, which is why
Joe
he
Biden,
passed a
Trump
tax
olha
bill
para os
benefiting
ricos.
the top 1% and the
Por isso que ele
biggest
diminuiu
corporations of
impostos
America, leading
das grandes
to a
corporações,
$2 trillion deficit that the American people are going to have.
levando a 2 trilhões de
On
dólares
day
em
one, Joe
déficit.
Biden will repeal that tax bill. He'll
O
get
Trump
rid
no
of it.
primeiro dia vai
And
tirar
what he'll
isso.
do with the money is invest it in the American people.
O que ele vai
And
fazer é
through a
investir no
plan
povo
that is about
americano.
investing in infrastructure, something that Donald Trump said he would do. I remember hearing about some infrastructure week. I don't think it ever happened. But Joe Biden will do that. He'll
Vai
invest in
investir em
infrastructure. It's about
infraestrutura,
upgrading our roads and bridges, but also investing in clean energy and renewable energy.
energia
Joe is
limpa,
going to invest that money in what
investir
we
esse
need to
dinheiro
do
em
around innovation. There was a time when our country believed in science and invested in research and development so that we
Diz que
were
teve
an
tempo que os
innovation
Estados Unidos
leader on the globe. Joe Biden
acreditavam
will
na
use that money
ciência
to invest
e
in
que agora eles vão
education.
investir na
So,
educação,
for
na
example,
inovação,
for
na
folks who
ciência.
want to go to a 2-year community college, it will be free. If you come from a family that
E
makes less than $125,000, you'll
o
go to
community
a public
college vai
university
ser
for free.
grátis, que
And
são
across the board,
pequenas
we'll make
faculdades
sure
locais.
that if you have student loan debt, it's cut by $10,000. That's how
Vão
Joe
cortar
Biden
10
thinks
mil
about the economy, which is it's about
as
investing in the
dívidas dos
people of our
estudantes.
country, as opposed to passing a tax bill, which had the benefit of letting American corporations go offshore to do their business.
Thank you,
You're
Senator
welcome.
Harris. Vice President Pence, your administration has been predicting a rapid and robust recovery, but the latest economic report suggests that's not happening. Should Americans be braced
Está dizendo que
for an
a
economic
recuperação
comeback
não
that
está
is
sendo
going
tão
to take
rápida
not
quanto eles
months, but a
disseram que ia ser.
year or more? You have
A
2 minutes.
recuperação
to answer
demoraria
on
mais
your own.
ano ou mais.
When President Trump and I took office, America had gone through the slowest economic recovery since the Great Depression.
Quando eles assumiram,
When
Trump
Joe
e
Biden
ele,
was vice president, they tried to
a
tax,
recuperação
and spend, and regulate, and bail out.
durante o Obama foi a mais lenta dele.
President Trump cut taxes across the board. Despite what
Impostos.
Senator Harris says, the average American family of 4 had $2,000 in
A
savings.
família
and
média
taxes.
ganhou
And
$2.000
with the rise in
deixando de
wages
pagar
that
impostos.
occurred, most predominantly for blue-collar, hard-working Americans,
Aumento
the average
salarial
household income for a family of 4 increased by $4,000 following
de
President
4 mil
Trump's tax cuts. But America,
salarial
you just heard Senator Harris tell
ao
you, on day one,
família de
Joe
4.
Biden's going to raise your taxes.
No dia
It's really
1,
remarkable to think. Susan.
Biden vai aumentar
I mean,
impostos.
right after a time where we're going through a pandemic that lost 22 million jobs at the height, we've already added back 11.6 million jobs.
2 milhões
Because we had a
de
president
empregos
who
foram
cut taxes,
perdidos.
rolled back
E
regulation,
agora
unleashed
já
America,
voltaram
and
11
fought for
milhões.
free and fair trade, and secured $4 trillion from the Congress of the United States to give direct payments to
Ele
families,
conseguiu
save 50 million jobs through the Paycheck
dinheiro
Protection
direto para
Program.
as pessoas
We
nesse
literally
momento da
spared
pandemia.
no expense to help the American people and the American worker through this. Joe
Deixou de
Biden and
gastar
Kamala
nada para
Harris
estimular,
want to raise
para dar
taxes.
para
They
auxiliar
want
os
to bury
americanos.
our economy under a $2 trillion
Biden quer
Green New Deal,
aumentar
which
os
you were one of the
impostos,
original co-sponsors of in the United States
quer
Senate.
criar o
They
New
want to
Green New Deal,
abolish
que
fossil fuels
abolir
and ban
os
fracking, which would cost hundreds of
abolir o
thousands of
fracking e
American
outros
jobs
combustíveis
all across
fósseis,
the heartland.
vai
And Joe Biden wants to go
aumentar
back
o
to
desemprego.
economic surrender to China. That when we
E
took
eles vão
office, half of our
voltar
international
essa
trade deficit was with China alone. And Joe Biden wants to repeal all of the tariffs.
não
that
subjugar de
President
novo
Trump put
pela
into
China se eles
effect to fight
ganharem,
for
que
American
os Estados
jobs
Unidos,
and American
sob
workers.
Trump, conseguiram
Joe Biden says democracy is
deitar,
on the
né, a
ballot.
China.
Make no mistake about it, Susan. The American economy, the American comeback is on the ballot with 4 more years of growth.
Thank you,
A
sir.
economia dos
Opportunity,
Estados
4
Unidos
more years
está
of President
em
Donald Trump.
questão nas eleições.
2021
Thank
is
you,
going to
Vice
be the
President.
biggest economic year in the history of history.
2021 vai
Thank
ser
you, Vice
muito,
President Pence.
muito bom se os
Senator
americanos, se eles ganharem.
Well, I mean, I thought we saw enough of it in last week's debate, but I think this is supposed to be a debate based on fact and truth. And the truth and the fact is, Joe Biden has been very clear. He will not raise taxes on anybody
Okay.
who makes less than $400,000
He said
a
he's
year.
going to repeal
mentira.
the Trump tax cuts.
Mr. Vice President, I'm speaking.
Well,
I'm speaking.
it'd be important if you said the truth. Joe Biden said twice in the debate last week that he's going to repeal the Trump tax cuts. That was tax cuts that gave the average working family $2,000 in a tax break every single year. Senator,
that is
that's the math.
absolutely not true. That
is he
tax
only
bill,
cutting? Is he only going to repeal part of the Trump tax cuts?
if you don't mind letting me finish, we can then
Please.
have a conversation, okay?
Please.
Okay. Joe Biden will not raise taxes
Não
on
vai
anyone who
aumentar.
makes less than $400,000 a year.
Biden
He's
não
been very
vai
clear about that.
aumentar
Joe
impostos quem
Biden will
ganha
not end fracking.
pouco.
He has been very
Não vai
clear about
abolir o
that.
fracking, embora isso seja não é verdade.
Joe Biden is the one who, during the Great Recession, was responsible for the Recovery Act
Joe Biden
that brought
foi
America
responsável
back. And now
pela
the
recuperação do
Trump-Pence
Obama.
administration wants to take credit when they rode the coattails of Joe Biden's success for the economy that they had at the beginning of their term. Of course, now the economy is a complete disaster. But Joe Biden, on the one hand, did that. On the other hand, you have Donald Trump, who has reigned over a recession that is being compared to the Great Depression. On the one
Agora
hand, you
o
have
Trump
Joe Biden,
tem uma
who was
depressão,
responsible with President Barack Obama for the Affordable
responsável
Care
por uma
Act,
depressão
which
comparável
brought
com a de
healthcare to over
29.
20 million Americans and protected people with pre-existing conditions. And what it also did is it saved those families who otherwise were going bankrupt.
Quando
because of
Obama
hospital
Quer,
bills
que
they
ele
could not
lidou com a
afford. On
saúde
the
e
other
tal,
hand, you have
Trump
Donald
não
Trump who's in
conseguiu
court
fazer
right
isso.
now trying to get rid of
Thank you, Senator
trying to
Harris.
get rid of the Affordable Care Act,
O
which
Trump
means
queria
that
acabar com
you
o
will
Obamacare.
lose protections if you have pre-existing conditions. And this is very important, Susan.
Yes,
And it's
but we need
important.
to give Vice President.
I'd
Pence a
just like
chance
to, he
respond.
interrupted me, and I'd like to just finish, please. If you have a pre-existing condition, heart disease,
problema
diabetes, breast
pré-existente de
cancer,
saúde,
they're coming for you.
e os
If you
republicanos vão
love
tirar
someone
isso.
who has a pre-existing
It's nonsense.
condition,
Thank you,
they're
Senator
coming
Harris.
for you. If you
Nonsense.
are under the age of 26 on your parents' coverage, they're coming for you.
Senator Harris, thank you.
You're
Let me
welcome.
give you a chance to respond.
Well, I hope we have a chance to talk about health care because Obamacare was a disaster. The American people remember it well. And President Trump and I have a plan to improve health care and
Estamos falando para a saúde que o Obamacare foi
conditions for every.
trágico, foi
America.
péssimo.
But look, Senator Harris, you're entitled to your own opinion, but you're not entitled to your own facts. You
É que ela
yourself said
pode
on
ter opinião,
multiple
mas não
occasions
fatos.
when you were running for president
E ela
that
tinha
you would
dito,
ban fracking.
ela
Joe
baniria o
Biden
fracking.
looked at a supporter in the eye and pointed and said, I guarantee
Joe Biden falou, eu
we'll
garantirei,
abolish fossil fuels.
vou
They
abolir.
have a $2 trillion
Combustíveis
version of the
fósseis.
Green New Deal, Susan, that your
Eles têm uma
newspaper,
versão de 2
USA
trilhões
said
de dólares
really
para o Green
wasn't
New
that
Deal,
very different from the original Green
e não é
New
muito
Deal.
diferente do original.
More taxes, more regulation,
Mais impostos, mais
banning
regulações,
fracking, abolishing fossil fuel, crushing
combustíveis
American
fósseis.
energy, and economic surrender to China is a
Rendição econômica à
prescription for
China.
economic decline. President Trump and I
É
will keep
a receita para o
America
declínio
growing.
econômico.
The V-shaped recovery that's underway right now will continue with 4 more years of President Donald Trump. In the White House.
Thank you very, very much, Vice President Pence. Once again, you've provided the perfect segue to a new topic, which is climate change. And Vice President Pence, I'd like to pose the first question to
É um
you.
novo tópico.
This year, we've seen record-setting hurricanes in the South. Another one, Hurricane Delta, is now threatening the Gulf. And we have seen record-setting wildfires in the West. Do you believe,
Tornados,
as the
furacões,
scientific
e
community has concluded,
incêndios.
that man-made climate change has
Esse
made
ano.
wildfires bigger, hotter, and more
Ele
deadly,
acredita que a
and have made hurricanes
mudança
wetter,
climática
slower,
piorou tudo isso.
and more damaging? You have 2 minutes uninterrupted.
Thank you, Susan. Well, first, I'm very proud of our record on the environment and on conservation. According to all of the best estimates, our
Orgulhoso do
Our
que
air and
deram
land are
sobre
cleaner than any time ever recorded.
a
Our water
miguates
is
estão
among the
mais
cleanest
com mais
in the world.
qualidade.
And just a little while ago, the president signed the Outdoors Act. It's the largest investment in our public lands and public parks.
O investimento que eles fizeram.
D source
So
FU a
President Trump has
vagabond.
made a commitment to conservation and to the environment. Now, with regard to climate change, the climate is changing. But the issue is, what's the cause and what do we do about it? President Trump has made it clear that we're going to continue to listen to the science. Now, Joe Biden and Kamala Harris would put us back in the Paris Climate Accord. They'd impose the Green New Deal, which would
D
crush
spec
American
Discord
energy,
NATO
would
source
increase
Iran
the energy
Negostifer.
costs of American families in their homes, and literally would crush American jobs. And President Trump and I believe that the progress that we have made in a cleaner environment has been happening precisely because we have a strong free market economy. You know, what's remarkable is the United States has reduced CO2 more
histórico dos Estados
countries that are
Unidos,
still
no
in
meio
the
ambiente,
Paris
dizendo que
Climate Accord, but we've done it
diminuiu
through
a
innovation,
emissão de
and
carbono,
we've done it through
aumentaram a
natural gas
inovação,
and
mesmo
fracking.
com
Each
fracking e
senator,
gás
the
natural.
American people can go look at the record. I know Joe Biden says otherwise now, as you do, but the both of you repeatedly committed to abolishing fossil fuel and banning fracking.
Tá voltando
And
a
so
dizer que vai
by
abolir os
creating the kind of
combustíveis
American
fósseis,
innovation, we're actually steering toward a stronger and better environment. With regard to
apoiando a
wildfires,
inovação,
President
estão
Trump and I
melhorando o meio
believe that
ambiente.
forest management has to be front and center.
Quanto aos
Even
incêndios,
Governor Gavin Newsom from your state has agreed we've got to work on forest management. And with regard to
melhorar
hurricanes, the
manejamento
National
de
Oceanic
florestas,
Administration tells us that
é,
actually, as
quanto
difficult as they
aos
are,
tornados e
there
furacões,
are
é
no more
muito
hurricanes today than
Thank
there
you.
were 100 years ago.
é difícil dizer, mas
Thank
que
you.
não há
But
menos
many of
furacões
the
do que há menos
climate
anos, 100 anos
alarmists
atrás.
use hurricanes and wildfires to try and
Thank
sell
you,
their
Vice
bill of
President
goods of a
Pence.
Green New Deal. And President Trump and I are going to always put
Thank you,
American
Vice
jobs and
President
American
Pence.
workers first.
Senator
O
Harris,
Trump e ele vão
as
colocar
the
sempre o
Vice President
trabalhador
mentioned, you
à frente.
co-sponsored the Green New Deal in Congress. But Vice
Kamala Harris
President Biden said in
apoiou
last
o
week's
Green New
debate
Deal.
that he does not support the Green
Ele
New
não
Deal.
apoia, mas que o Biden
But if
disse
you
que não
look at the
apoia.
Biden-Harris campaign website, it describes the Green New Deal as a crucial framework. What
No site da
exactly
campanha
would be the
diz que o Green New
stance of a
Deal
Biden-Harris
é
administration
importantíssimo,
toward
um
the
framework.
Green New Deal? You have 2 minutes
E
uninterrupted.
eles pensam
Sure.
sobre,
So,
ela pensa,
first of all,
a campanha pensa
I
sobre
will
o Green New
repeat,
Deal.
and the American people know that Joe Biden will not ban fracking. That is a fact.
Joe Biden não vai banir fracking.
That is a fact.
Fato, isso é
I
um
will
fato.
repeat that Joe Biden has been very clear that he thinks about growing jobs, which is why he will not increase taxes for anyone who makes less than $400,000
Biden não vai
a
aumentar
year.
impostos, pessoas.
Joe Biden's economic plan, Moody's, which is a reputable Wall Street firm, has said will create 7 million more jobs than Donald Trump's. And part of those jobs that will be created by Joe Biden
Empregos criados por Joe
are going to
Biden,
be
em
about
parte,
clean energy and renewable
serão
energy.
em energia limpa.
Because you see, Joe understands that the west coast of our country is burning, including my home state of California. Joe sees what is happening on the Gulf states, which are being battered by storms. Joe has seen and talked with the farmers in Iowa, whose entire crops have been destroyed because of
Falando da
floods.
situação dramática
And
do
so
meio
Joe
ambiente,
believes, again, in science. I'll tell you
E
something,
Joe Biden
Susan. I
acredita
served
na
when I first
ciência.
got to the Senate on the committee that's responsible for the environment. Do you know this administration took the word science off the website?
E essa
And
administração
then
tirou
took the
ciência,
phrase
a palavra
climate change
ciência,
off the website?
do site.
We have seen a pattern
sobre a
with this
questão.
administration, which is they don't believe in science.
A administração não
And
acredita na
Joe's plan
ciência.
is
O
about
Trump, né?
saying we're going to deal with it, but we're also going to create jobs. Donald Trump, when asked about the wildfires in California, and the question was, you know, the science is telling us this, you know what Donald Trump said? Science doesn't know.
O
So,
Trump teria dito, a ciência não
let's talk
sabe de
about
tudo,
who is prepared to lead
cerca dos
our
incêndios,
country
né?
over the course of the next 4 years on what is an existential threat to us as human
Quem é
beings.
melhor, né,
Joe is
para
about
lidar
saying we're going to invest that in
da
renewable energy, we're going to be
crise
about the creation of
existencial.
millions of jobs, we will achieve net zero emissions by 2050,
Eles vão
carbon
acabar
neutral by
com
2035. Joe
a
has a
emissão de
plan.
novos,
This has been a lot of talk from the Trump administration, and really it has
novas
been to go
emissões,
backward instead of forward. We will
gás
also re-enter
carbônico.
the climate agreement with
Eles
profit.
vão voltar
Senator Harris
para
just said
os
that
acordos de
climate change is an
Paris.
existential threat. Vice President Pence, do you believe that climate change poses an
Ele
existential
está
threat?
perguntando se a mudança climática é uma
As I said, Susan,
ameaça,
the climate is changing. We'll follow the science.
uma ameaça existencial.
Once again, Senator Harris is denying the fact that they're going to raise taxes on every American. Joe Biden said twice in the debate last week
Voltou para os
that on
impostos.
day one he was going to repeal the Trump tax cuts.
Ele vai,
Those
o
tax
Trump,
cuts
o
delivered
Biden vai aumentar
$2,000
impostos.
in tax relief to the average family of 4 across America. And with regard to banning fracking, I just recommend that people look at the record. You yourself said repeatedly that you would ban fracking.
Dizem que a
You were the
Kamala
first
Harris ia
Senate
banir o
co-sponsor
fracking.
of the Green New Deal.
Ela assinou o Green New
While Joe
Deal.
Biden denied the Green New Deal, Susan, thank you for pointing out the Green New Deal is on their campaign website.
O
And
Green New
as
Deal está
USA
na
Today
campanha
said,
deles, no
it's
site de
essentially
campanha.
the same plan as you co-sponsored with AOC when she submitted it in the Senate. And you just heard the senator say that she's going to resubmit America to the Paris Climate
Eles vão
Accord.
voltar, né, para os acordos de Paris.
The American people have always cherished our environment. We'll continue to cherish it. We've made great progress
E o
reducing
povo americano
CO2 emissions
vai
through
continuar
American
valorizando o seu
innovation
meio
and the
ambiente.
development of natural gas through fracking. We don't need a massive $2 trillion Green New
Eles
Deal
não
that
precisam
impose
de
all new
Green New
mandates
Deal.
on American businesses and
2
American
trilhões de
families.
dólares.
Thank you.
Joe Biden wants us
Thank
to
you, Vice
retrofit
President.
4 million
Thank you, Vice
American
President.
business
E
buildings.
o Biden quer
It
refazer
makes no
4
sense.
milhões
It
de
will cost
prédios,
jobs.
que
President
faz parte do
Trump
Green New
Thank
Deal.
you,
is
Vice
going to put
President.
America first. He's going to put jobs
Trump
first.
põe a
and
América
take
first.
care of our environment and follow the science.
Eles vão
And
cuidar
on
do meio
issue of
ambiente e
jobs,
seguir a ciência.
let's talk about that. The vice president earlier referred to it as part of what he thinks is an accomplishment, the president's trade war with China. You lost
Agora falou
that
da
trade war. You lost it.
guerra comercial,
What ended up
que os
happening
americanos perderam a
It's
guerra
because
comercial.
of a so-called trade war with China, America lost 300,000 manufacturing jobs.
A América perdeu
Farmers have experienced
centenas de
bankruptcy
milhares
because of it. We are in a
de
manufacturing
empregos
recession because of it.
industriais, que eles estão em recessão industrial
And
por
when
causa
we
disso.
look at where this
Fazendeiros
administration has
faliram
been,
também.
there are estimates that by the end of the term of this administration, they will have lost more jobs than almost any other presidential
E ao final da
administration.
administração,
And the American people know
eles
what
teriam
I'm talking about.
perdido mais emprego que
You
qualquer
know,
outro na história.
I think about
Mas é
20-year-olds.
uma
We have a
palhaçada, né?
20-year-old, a 20-something-year-old who are coming out of high school and college
Porque
right now.
no final
and
das
you're
contas
wondering,
a pandemia
is there
causou
gonna be
isso.
a job there for me? We're looking at people who
Que
are
jovens estão
trying
saindo
to figure
agora
out
do
how they're
ensino
gonna
médio e
pay
não tem
rent by the end of the month. Almost half of
não tem
American
empregos.
renters are worried about whether they're going to be able to pay rent by the end of the month. This is where the economy is in America right now, and it is because
Eita.
of the catastrophe and the failure of leadership of this administration.
Thank you, Senator Harris. Vice President Pence, let me give you just 15 seconds to respond because then I want to move on.
Well, I'd love to
segundos para o
respond.
Pence responder.
Lost the trade war with China. Joe Biden never fought it.
Dizendo que
Joe Biden's been
guerra
a
contra a China, o
cheerleader for
Biden nunca
communist China through over the last
lutou
several
contra a
decades.
China.
And again, Senator Harris, you're entitled to your opinion. You're not entitled to your own facts. When Joe Biden was vice president, we lost 200,000 manufacturing jobs, and President Obama said they were never coming back. He said we needed a magic wand to bring them back. In our first 3 years after we cut taxes,
you, Vice
rolled back
President.
regulation, unleashed American energy, this administration saw 500,000
Thank you, Vice
manufacturing
President
jobs
Dizendo
created.
que
And that's exactly the
500
kind
mil
of growth
empregos
we're gonna
industriais foram
continue to see as
criados,
we bring our nation
enquanto no
through
Obama
Thank you, Vice
perderam
President.
200 mil.
the Green New
Thank you,
Deal, your
Vice
massive
President
new
Pence.
mandates, your Paris Climate Accord, it's going to kill jobs this time, just like it killed jobs.
I'd like
Susan,
to-
I just need to respond very briefly,
15
please.
seconds and
Thank
then
you.
we'll move
Thank you. Joe Biden is responsible for saving America's auto industry, and you voted against it.
Dizendo que
So
o
let's
Biden
set the
salvou a
record
indústria
straight.
automobilística e ele votou contra isso.
I'd like to talk about China. We have as our next topic, we have no more
China agora.
complicated or consequential foreign relationship than the one with China. It is
mais
a huge
difícil e
market for
consequencial.
American agricultural goods. It's a
Mercado
potential
enorme.
partner in dealing with climate change in North Korea. And in a
O seu
video
parceiro
tonight,
na-
President Trump again blamed it for the coronavirus, saying China will pay.
Trump hoje
Vice
culpou a
President
China
Pence,
dizendo que a
how
China
would
vai
you
pagar.
describe our fundamental relationship with China?
Como ele
Competitors,
descreveria
adversaries,
a relação com a
enemies?
China?
You have 2
Competidores,
minutes.
Thank you,
os
sir.
adversários.
Well, before I leave that, let me speak to voting records if I can. You know, everybody knows that NAFTA cost literally thousands of American factories to close. We saw
Agora tá falando do
automotive jobs
NAFTA.
go south of the border. President Trump fought to renegotiate NAFTA.
E
The
o
United
Trump
States
renegociou o
Mexico-Canada
NAFTA.
agreement is now the law of the land. American people deserve to know Senator Kamala Harris was one of only 10 members of the Senate to vote against the USMCA.
Ela foi uma das únicas que votou contra essa reforma comercial que
It was a
foi
huge win
considerada
for
por todos
farmers,
muito
especially
positiva.
dairy in the upper Midwest. But Senator, you said it didn't go far enough on climate change, that you put your radical environmental agenda ahead of American auto workers and ahead of American jobs. The American people deserve to know that. It's probably why Newsweek magazine said that
E
Kamala
ela
Harris was the
agora tá dizendo
most
que
liberal member of
ela
the
foi a mais
United States Senate in
progressista
2019.
em
More
2019.
liberal than Bernie Sanders, more
Sanders.
liberal than any of the others in the United States Senate. So now, with regard to China,
Sobre a China agora,
Susan, first and foremost, China is to blame for the coronavirus. And President Trump is not happy about it. He's made that very clear. Made it
Que a
clear
China
again
é
today.
culpada do coronavírus.
China and the World Health Organization did not play straight with the American people.
Eles não
They
foram
did not
honestos,
let our personnel
nem a
into
China, nem a
get
OMS.
information on the coronavirus until the middle of February. Fortunately, President Trump, in dealing with China from the outset of this administration, standing up to China that had been taking advantage of America for decades in the wake of Joe Biden's cheerleading for China, President Trump made that decision before the end of January to suspend all travel from China.
Dizendo que o Trump
And
agiu
again,
bem ao
the American
suspender
people
a
deserve to know Joe Biden opposed President Trump's decision to suspend all
suspensão
travel from China.
das viagens
He
da
said it
China
was
que o Biden se
hysterical. He
opôs.
said
Thank you, Vice
xenophobic.
President Pence.
But President Trump has
Vice President
stood
Pence,
up
your
to
time is
China.
up.
We're going to continue to stand strong.
Thank
Que eles vão
Vice President.
continuar se
We want
opondo
to
à China.
improve the relationship, but we're going to level the playing field and we're going to hold
Vice President
China
Pence.
accountable for
Eles
what
vão
they
fazer
did
eles
to America
responsáveis.
with the coronavirus.
Thank you. Senator Harris, let me ask you the same question that I asked the Vice President. How would you describe
Como ela
our
descreveria
fundamental
a relação
relationship with
fundamental
China?
com a
Are
China?
we competitors, adversaries,
Competidores,
enemies?
adversários ou inimigos?
You'll have 2 minutes uninterrupted.
Susan, the Trump administration's perspective and approach to China has resulted in the loss of American lives, American
Relações com a China,
jobs, and America's
começou,
standing.
indivíduos
There's
americanos,
a weird
trabalhos.
obsession that President Trump has had with getting rid
Trump
of
tem uma
whatever
obsessão
accomplishment was achieved by President Obama and Vice President Biden.
diminuir
For example,
o
they
Biden e o Obama
created
conseguiram
within the
fazer.
White House an office that basically was responsible for monitoring pandemics. They got away, they got rid of it.
Not true.
There was a team of disease experts that President
O
Obama
Trump tirou
and Vice
o
President
grupo que
Biden
trabalhava na Casa
dispatched
Branca.
to China to
Eles tiraram.
monitor what is now predictable and what might happen. They pulled them out. We now
Tinha
are
grupo
looking at
baixado para a China
210,000
época do Obama.
Americans who have lost their lives.
e eles tiraram também.
Let's look at
Pence falou
the
que era
job
mentira,
situation.
mas
We mentioned
interrompeu.
before the trade deal, the trade war, they wanted to call it, with China. It resulted in the loss of over 300 manufacturing jobs and a manufacturing recession, and the American consumer paying
Eles
thousands
falam
of dollars more for
coisas
goods
diferentes o tempo
because of
inteiro,
that
assim.
failed
Não ficar negando o outro.
war that they called it. Then let's talk about standing. Pew, a reputable research firm, has done an analysis that shows that leaders of all of our formerly allied countries have now decided that they hold in greater esteem and respect Xi Jinping,
E
the
teve uma
head
pesquisa
of
que
the
mostrou
Chinese
que
Communist Party, than they do
aliados,
Donald Trump,
aliados dos
the
Estados
President of the
Unidos
United
consideram
States, the
o
Commander-in-Chief
Xi
of the
Jinping,
United
digamos,
States.
melhores
This is
condições
where
de
we
relação
are
do que
today.
com o Trump.
Because of a failure of
Estranho, né?
leadership
Mas é,
by this
o Biden,
administration.
o Trump realmente pegou
Senator
pesado com os
Harris, we've
aliados.
seen changes in the role of the United States in terms of global leadership over the past 4 years.
Mudanças no
Enter
papel de
first
liderança dos
times
Estados
do
Unidos.
What's your definition? We've seen strains with China, of course, as the Vice President mentioned. We've seen strains with our traditional allies in
Dificuldades com a
NATO
China,
and
com os
elsewhere.
aliados.
What is your definition of the role of American leadership in 2020?
Qual é o papel que ela vê dos Estados Unidos?
So, you know, Joe is, I love talking with Joe about a lot of these issues. And, you know, Joe, I think he said it quite well. He says, you know, foreign policy, it might sound complicated, but really it's relationships. So just think about it as relationships.
Lembra que o Biden falou que
we know this in
relações
our
exteriores é
personal
como se fossem
professional
relações
relationships. You gotta keep
pessoas.
your word to your friends. You gotta be loyal to your friends. People who've stood
Leal aos
with
seus
you,
amigos.
you gotta stand with them. You gotta know who your adversaries are and keep them in check. But what we have seen with Donald Trump is
Definição.
that he has betrayed our friends and
Traiu os inimigos.
and embraced dictators around the world. Let's
Abraçou
take, for
ditadores.
example, Russia. So, Russia, I serve on the Intelligence Committee of the United States Senate.
De
America's
inteligência.
intelligence community told us Russia interfered in the election of the President of the United States in
A Rússia
2016 and
interferiu em
is playing in
2016.
2020. Christopher
Falaram.
Wray, the director of the FBI, said the same. But Donald Trump, the commander-in-chief of the United States of America, prefers to take the word of Vladimir Putin over the word of the American intelligence community.
Eu prefiro escutar o
You look at our friends at
Putin
NATO.
do que a
Who've
agência de
walked away
inteligência.
from agreements. You can look at the Iran nuclear deal, which now has put us in a position
O acordo do Irã,
where we
ele
are
saiu.
less safe because they are building up
O Irã
what might
agora
end
estão
up being
menos
a
seguros.
significant nuclear arsenal.
Agora o Irã
We were
pode estar
in that
construindo
deal,
um
guys. We
arsenal
were
nuclear.
in the Iran nuclear deal with friends, with allies around the country, and because of Donald Trump's unilateral approach to foreign policy, coupled with his isolationism, he pulled us out and
isolacionista.
has made America less safe. So,
E o
Susan,
ter
it's
saído dos
about
acordos do Irã
relationships. And the thing that has
pelo menos
always
segura a
been part
América,
of the
que é
strength of
ridículo.
our nation, in addition to our great military, has been that we keep our word. But Donald Trump doesn't understand that because he
O
doesn't
Trump não
understand
entende manter
what
a
it means to
palavra.
be honest.
Ele não sabe o que é ser honesto.
Thank you, Senator
Pesado
Harris.
esse ataque.
Vice President Pence, let me give you a chance to respond.
Well, thank you. President Trump kept his word when we moved the American embassy to Jerusalem, the capital of
Trump
the state of
manteve a sua palavra
When Joe
quando
Biden was
mudou
vice
a embaixada
president, they
para
promised to do
Jerusalém.
that and they never did.
Biden
We stood
prometeu e não
strong
conseguiu,
with
não
our
fez.
allies, but we've been demanding. NATO is now contributing more to our common defense than
Eles têm
ever
cobrado.
before,
E
thanks
a
to
OTAN tem
President
contribuído
Trump's
mais
leadership.
agora,
We've strengthened our
gastos
alliances
militares,
across the Asia Pacific
estabelecer
and
as
we've stood strong
alianças com o Sudeste.
against those who would do us harm. You know, when President Trump came into office, ISIS had captured an area of the Middle East the size of Pennsylvania. But President Trump unleashed the American military, and our armed forces destroyed the ISIS caliphate and took down the
Destruiu
leader
o
al-Baghdadi
Trump
without
o
one American
califado.
casualty.
ISIS, que é verdade.
Al-Baghdadi was responsible for the death of thousands. But notably, America's hearts today are with the family of Kayla Mueller, her parents of which are here with us tonight in Salt Lake City. Today, two of the ISIS killers responsible for Kayla Mueller's murder were brought to justice in the United States.
ISIS
Jihadi John was killed on the battlefield along with the other beetle. The reality is that when Joe Biden was vice president, we had an opportunity to save Kayla Mueller. It breaks my heart to reflect on it, but the military came into the Oval Office, presented a plan. They said they knew where Kayla was.
Dizem
Baghdadi
que
had
na
held her
época
for
do
18
Biden
months, abused her,
dava para ter
mercilessly
salvado essa
killed her.
assassinos do
When
ISIS.
Joe Biden was vice president, they hesitated for a month. And when armed forces finally went in, it was clear she'd been moved 2 days earlier.
Mês.
And her family says with a heart that broke the heart of every American that if President Donald Trump had been president, they believe Kayla would be alive today.
Thank you, Vice
Look, we
President.
destroyed the ISIS caliphate. And you talk about re-entering the Iran nuclear deal. I mean, the last administration transferred $1.8 billion to the leading state sponsor
Thank you, Vice
of
President.
terrorism. President Donald Trump
Deram
got us out of the
Thank you,
deal.
Vice
bilhão de
President.
dólares
And when
para o regime
Qasem
terrorista.
Soleimani was traveling to Baghdad
Thank you,
to do
Vice
harm
President
to Americans, President Donald Trump took
Thank you,
him
Vice
out.
President Pence.
And America is safer, our allies are safer, and the American people know President Donald Trump will never
Thank you,
hesitate
Vice President
to take
Pence.
action.
I would like to give
I'd like to-
Senator Harris a chance to respond, but not at such great length because, of course, there are other topics we want to talk about.
But I would like equal time.
Yes,
Thank you.
please go ahead.
First of all, to the Mueller family, I know about your daughter's case, and I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry.
Desculpa
What
por
happened
causa
to
da
her
menina.
is awful, and it should have never happened. And I know Joe feels the same way, and I know that President Obama feels the same way. But you mentioned Soleimani. Let's start there.
Dou pro Soleimani, que sabe que ficou
So,
pesado, que ela não
after
tinha o que
the
falar
strike on
sobre
Soleimani,
a menina que morreu,
there was
que
a
o Biden e
counter
o Obama fizeram merda.
on our troops in Iraq,
Soleimani agora falando.
and
Em
they
janeiro mataram ele.
suffered serious brain injuries. And do you know what Donald Trump dismissed them as? Headaches. And this is about a pattern of Donald Trump's, where he has referred to our men who are serving in our military as suckers and losers.
Eles continuam com a mentira de que o Trump falou que eles eram suckers e losers.
And
Soldados
stood
mortos.
above
Isso é
the
ridículo, já foi
graves
desmentido 1000 vezes.
of our fallen heroes
Ele atrás de mentira.
and said, what's in it for them? Because, of course, you know, he only thinks about what's in it for him. Let's take what he said about John McCain. a great American hero.
Ele falou do John McCain é verdade. Que
And
ele
Donald
falou
Trump
mal dele.
says he
Ele não era
doesn't deserve to be called a hero because he was a prisoner of war. And this is very important when you want to talk about who is the current commander-in-chief and what they care about and what they don't care about. Public reporting that Russia had bounties on the heads of American soldiers. And you know what a bounty is?
Porque
It's somebody
coloca-
puts a price on your head
os
and they
russos tinham
will pay it if
colocado
you are killed.
preço na
And
cabeça de
Donald
soldados
Trump
americanos e
had
que o
talked
Trump
at least 6 times to Vladimir
falou
Putin
com Putin pelo menos 6
and never
vezes.
brought up the subject. Joe Biden would never do that.
Thank
Joe
you.
Biden would, but Joe Biden
Yeah.
would hold Russia to account
O Joe
for
Biden
any
teria colocado a
threats
Rússia
to
responsável por
our
qualquer
nation's
ameaça
security
para
or
a
to
segurança.
our troops who are sacrificing their lives for the sake of our democracy and our safety.
Thank you, Senator Harris. This is such an important issue, but we have other important issues as well. And
Susan,
I want to make
respond
sure
to
we
that.
have a chance
I really
to
have to
talk about
respond to that.
I'm
Look, she has
15 seconds because
Well, I got to
we're
have
trying
more
to
than
keep.
that. Look,
Well, I'm sorry, but Vice President
Look,
Pence, you've
I-
had more time than
look,
she's
the-
had
the
so far.
slanders against President Donald Trump
Acusações
regarding
contra o
men
Trump.
and women of our armed forces are absurd.
I'm
Forças
sorry,
Armadas
Vice
é
My son
President
is a
Pence.
captain in the United
Yes.
States Marine Corps. My son-in-law is deployed in the United States Navy. I can assure all of you, with sons and daughters serving in our military, President Donald Trump not only respects but reveres
Não só
all of
respeita,
those
mas
who serve in our armed
reverencia
forces.
todos
Any
que servem nas
suggestion
Forças Armadas.
otherwise is ridiculous.
But
Let
Thank
me
you,
also
Vice President
say
Pence.
the
Vice
The
President
American
Pence,
people
you know,
deserve, Susan,
Vice
the
President
American
Pence,
people
I
deserve to
didn't,
know.
Vice President
that-
Pence, I did not,
the
excuse me,
Ameri- Susan, the
I did
American
not
people
create
deserve
the
to know
rules for tonight.
Joe Biden.
Your
and Kam-
campaigns agreed to the rules for tonight's
I-
debate with the Commission on Presidential Debates. I'm here to enforce them, which
que
involves
ela
moving
tem que
from
seguir
one
as
topic to
regras.
another, giving roughly equal time to both of you,
Go right
which is what I'm trying very hard to
Go
do.
right ahead.
So I want to go ahead and move to the next topic, which is an important one, as the last topic was, and that is the
What topic?
Supreme Court. On Monday, the Senate Judiciary Committee is scheduled to open hearings on Amy Coney
Senado
Barrett's
começou-
nomination to the Supreme Court. Senator Harris, you'll be there as a member of the committee. Her confirmation
Nessa
would cement the
sabatina
court's
da-
conservative majority and make it likely open to more abortion restrictions, even to overturning the landmark Roe v. Wade ruling. Access to abortion would then be up to the states.
A maioria
Vice
conservadora
President Pence,
pode
you're the
reverter a
former
questão
governor
da
of Indiana. If
aborto.
Roe v. Wade is overturned, what would you want Indiana to do?
Pence
Would
como
you want your
ex-governador de
home
Indiana.
state to
Como
ban
faria, né?
all abortions?
Baniria ou-
You have 2 minutes, uninterrupted.
Well, thank you for the question, but I'll use a little bit of my time to respond to that very important issue before.
Vai usar
The
o tempo
American
para
people deserve to know Qasem Soleimani, the Iranian general, was responsible for the death of hundreds of American service members. When the opportunity
muitos
came, we saw him headed to Baghdad to kill more Americans. President Trump didn't hesitate, and Qasem Soleimani is gone. But you deserve to know that Joe Biden and Kamala Harris actually criticized the decision
Mataram
to take out
Soleimani. O Biden e a Harris criticaram o
It's really inexplicable, but with regard to Joe Biden, it's explainable. Because history records that Joe Biden actually opposed the raid against Osama bin Laden.
ele se
It's
opôs
absolutely
ao
essential
ataque. O Biden se opôs ao ataque ao Osama Bin Laden.
who will not hesitate to act to protect American
A
lives
gente tem
and to
comandante
protect
que
American
não vai
service members, and
se
that's what you have in President Trump.
hesitar em atacar os inimigos.
Now, with regard to the Supreme Court of the United States, let me say President Trump and I could not be more enthusiastic
Muito
about the opportunity
entusiasmados
to see Judge Amy Coney Barrett become Justice Amy Coney
para se
Barrett.
tornar
She's a brilliant woman. And,
brilhante.
she will bring a lifetime of experience and a sizable American family to the Supreme Court of the United States.
Tem muita
And our
experiência.
hope is, in the hearing next week, unlike Justice Kavanaugh received with treatment from you and others, we hope she gets
Diferentemente
a
do
fair,
Kavanaugh, que foi muito maltratado no Senado.
and we particularly hope that we don't see the kind
Certamente
of
ele espera.
attacks on her Christian
Espero
faith
que não
that we
ataquem
saw
a fé
before.
cristã dela.
I mean, the Democrat chairman of the Judiciary Committee before, when
O democrata do
Judge
comitê
Barrett was being confirmed for the Court of Appeals, expressed concern that the dogma of her
Yes.
faith lived loudly in her. Dick Durbin of Illinois said that it
atacou
was a
a
concern.
fé dela.
Senator, I know one of our judicial nominees you actually attacked because they were a member of the Catholic Knights of Columbus just because the Knights of Columbus holds pro-life views and
Thank you.
pro-marriage views.
Thank you, Vice President
So
Pence. Your
my
time
hope
is
is
up.
that when the hearing takes place, that
Thank you, Vice
Espera.
President Pence.
that Judge Amy Coney Barrett
Amy
will
Coney
be
Barrett
respected,
será
Thank you, Vice
tratada
President.
voted
respeituosamente.
and confirmed
Thank
with the
you.
Supreme Court of the United
E
States.
Senator Harris,
confirmada.
you're the senator from and former Attorney General of California. So let me ask you a parallel question to the one I posed to the Vice President. If Roe v. Wade is overturned,
Se o Roe v.
what would you
Wade for
want
retirado,
California to do? Would you want your
o
home state
que
to
que
enact
você gostaria
no
que a Califórnia
restriction
fizesse?
on
Que não
access
tivesse
to
nenhuma
abortion?
restrição.
And you have 2 minutes uninterrupted.
Thank you, Susan. First of all, Joe Biden and I are both people of faith.
Joe Biden são
And
pessoas
it's
de fé.
insulting to suggest
É insultante
that we would
diria.
knock anyone for their faith. And in fact, Joe, if
Atacaria alguém pela
elected,
fé.
would be only the second practicing Catholic as
Biden seria o
president of the United
segundo
States.
católico
On the issue
dos Estados
of
Unidos,
this,
que é ridículo porque
of
ele
this
não segue nada
nomination,
da igreja, então.
Joe and I are very clear, as are the majority of the American people. We are 27 days before the decision about who will be the next president of the United States.
7 dias da
And,
eleição.
before, when this conversation has come up, it's been about election year or election time. We're literally in an election. Over 4 million people have voted. People are in the
4 milhões já
process of
votaram.
voting right now. And
Tá no
so
processo
Joe
em vários
has been
estados.
very clear, as the American people are. Let the American people
Biden
fill
falou,
that seat
deixe
in the White House. And
o povo
then we'll
americano
fill
decidir,
that seat on the United States Supreme Court. And to your point,
o
Susan,
presidente
the
decide.
issues before us couldn't be more serious. There's the issue of choice, and I will always fight for a woman's right to make a decision
Sempre
about her own
lutará
body. It should be her decision and not that
pró
of Donald
escolha,
Trump and the vice
escolha da
president,
mulher sobre
Michael
seu corpo,
Pence.
ou
But
seja,
let's
pro
also
aborto.
look at what else is before the court. It's
O que
the
mais está na
Affordable Care
corte, né?
Act. Like,
Obamacare,
literally in the midst of a public health pandemic,
no meio de uma pandemia,
when over 210,000 people have died and 7 million
210 mil
people
pessoas, 7 milhões de
probably
infectados.
have what will be in the future considered a pre-existing condition because you contracted the virus. Donald Trump is in court right now trying to get rid of the
O Trump
Affordable Care
está na
Act.
corte
And I said it
tentando
before,
reverter o
and it
Obamacare.
bears repeating. This means that there
Faria.
will be no more protections if they win
Nenhuma
for
mais
people with
proteção a pessoas
pre-existing
com...
conditions. This means
E aí ele já
that
desmentiu,
over
né?
20 million people will lose your coverage. It
20
means
milhões
that if you're
perderiam
under
seus
the age of
planos.
26, you can't stay on your parents'
Jovens que não
coverage
poderiam se
anymore.
manter, né?
And here's the thing. The
Seus
contrast
pais.
couldn't be more clear. They're trying to get rid of the Affordable Care Act. Joe
Thank you.
Biden is saying, let's expand coverage. Let's give you a choice of a public
Thank you,
option
Senator.
or private coverage. Let's
Biden
bring down
quer aumentar o
premiums.
Senator.
Obamacare.
Let's lower Medicare eligibility to 60.
Thank you, Senator.
That's true leadership.
You know,
Isso é liderança.
you mentioned earlier, Vice President Pence, that the president was committed to maintaining protections for people with pre-existing conditions.
O presidente
Um,
manteria proteção
But you
às
have this court case
condições
that you are supporting,
pré-existentes.
your administration supporting, that would strike down the Affordable Care Act. The president
Tem
says,
esse
President Trump says that he's going to
processo
protect
contra o
people
Obamacare.
with pre-existing conditions, but he has not explained how he would do that. And that
Ele não
was
diz
one of the toughest
como
nuts to
manteria
crack
essa
when they
segurança
were
das pessoas
passing
com
the
pré-existentes.
Affordable Care Act. So tell us specifically, how would your administration protect Americans with pre-existing conditions
Uma
have
administração
access to
especificamente
affordable
protegeu
insurance if the Affordable
pessoas
Care
com
Act was
doenças
struck down?
pré-existentes.
Well, thank you, Susan. But let me just say, addressing your very first question, I couldn't be more proud to serve as vice president to a president who stands without apology for the sanctity of human life.
Não podia ser mais orgulhoso de servir
I'm
para um
pro-life.
presidente que
I don't apologize for it.
defende a santidade da vida, que ele é
And this
pró-vida
is
e não
another
tem
one of those
vergonha
cases
disso.
where there's such a dramatic contrast. Joe Biden and
Contraste
Kamala
mais
Harris
dramático.
support taxpayer funding of abortion all the way up to the
Ela e o
moment of
Biden
birth. Late
apoiam-
term abortion. They want to increase funding to Planned Parenthood.
Quer aumentar
Now,
os
for our
fundos
part,
para
I would
uma,
never presume on
uma
Judge Amy
empresa
Coney
que
Barrett
aborteira,
rule on the Supreme
Planned
Court
Parenthood.
of the United States, but we'll continue to stand strong for the right to life. When you speak about the Supreme Court, though, I think the American people really deserve an answer, Senator Harris. Are you and Joe Biden going to pack the court?
Ela e o Joe Biden
Judge
vão
Amy
aumentar o
Coney Barrett
número
has
de...
confirmed? I mean, there have been
Supreme
29
Court.
vacancies on the Supreme Court during presidential election years.
Houve
for George
29
Washington and Barack
vacâncias
Obama.
durante
Presidents have
eleições
nominated in all 29
e todos os
cases.
presidentes
But
nomearam.
your party is actually
E
openly
hoje os
advocating
democratas estão
adding seats to
advogando
the
a
Supreme
aumentar o
Court,
número de
which has
juízes
had 9
da
seats
corte
for
que eu mencionei.
150 years if you don't get your way.
Mais de
This
150
is a
anos, são
classic
9
case of if you can't win by the
isso.
rules, You're going to change the
Se não
rules.
se
Now, you
ganha
refused
pelas
to answer the
regras,
question.
muda-se as
Joe
regras.
Biden has refused to answer the
Ela e o
question.
Biden não
So I think the
responderam a
American people
questão,
would really
na
like to
verdade, várias
know
vezes, que
if
os
Judge
americanos
Amy
querem
Coney
saber.
Barrett is confirmed to the Supreme
Amy
Court
Coney
of the
Barrett
United
foi
States.
confirmada,
Are you and Joe Biden, if somehow you win this election, going to
eles
pack the Supreme Court
farão
to
o
get
número
your
de
way?
juízes.
I'm so glad we went through a little history lesson. Let's do that a little more.
Ok.
In 1864,
Well, I'd like you to answer the
No,
question.
Mr.
Yes,
Vice President, I'm
please,
speaking.
very
I'm
fast.
speaking.
Tô falando esse sorriso
In
esquisito dela.
1864, one of the, I think, political heroes, certainly the
1864.
president, I assume if you also, Mr. Vice President, is Abraham Lincoln.
Mhm.
Abraham Lincoln was up for re-election. And it was
Estava tentando
27
reeleição.
days before the election.
Faltavam 27 dias para a
And a
eleição
seat became open on the United States Supreme Court.
e abriu uma vaga na
Abraham
Suprema.
Lincoln's party was in charge not only of the White House, but the Senate.
Os republicanos tinham
But
controle do
honest
Senado,
Abe said,
da,
not the
da
right thing to do. The
Casa
American
Branca.
people deserve to make the decision about
E
who
o
will be
Lincoln,
the next president of the United States.
o povo tinha
And then
direito de
that
escolher o
person
presidente
can
de
select who will serve for a lifetime
quem servirá
on
na
the
casa
highest
na
court of our land. And so Joe and I are very clear. The American people are voting right now. And it should be
o povo
their
americano vai estar
decision
votando, que tinha que ser a escolha
about
deles.
who
Só
will
quem vai
serve on this most important
servir na
body
Suprema Corte.
for a lifetime.
Thank you,
And
Senator
não
Harris.
respondeu.
people, Susan, are voting right now. They'd like to know if you and Joe Biden are going to pack the Supreme Court
Perguntando se vai aumentar a
if you
Suprema
don't
Corte
get
ou
your
não.
way in this nomination.
Let's talk about
You
packing.
once
Come
again
on,
gave a non-answer. Joe Biden gave a
Não
I'm
respondeu.
trying to
non-answer.
answer
The
you
American
now.
people deserve a straight answer. And if you haven't figured it out yet, the straight answer is they are going to
Eles
pack
vão
the
sim.
Supreme Court if they somehow win this election.
Eles ganharam a eleição.
Men and
Mr.
women,
Vice President,
I got
I
to tell you,
think
people across this country, if you cherish our Supreme Court, if you cherish the separation of powers, you need to
Ele
reject
apoia a
the
separação de
Biden-Harris
poderes.
ticket.
Tem
Come
que
November
rejeitar.
the 3rd, re-elect President Donald Trump, and we'll stand by that separation of powers in a 9-seat Supreme Court.
Yeah,
Thank
let's
you.
talk about packing the court then. Let's talk about the
Please.
fact. Yeah, I'm about to. So, the Trump-Pence administration has been, because I sit on the Senate Judiciary Committee, Susan, as you mentioned, and I've witnessed the appointments for lifetime appointments to the federal
dizem
courts,
que
district courts, courts of
No Comitê de Judiciário, que ela
people who
trabalha,
are purely ideological,
apontamento de
people who have been
pessoas
by legal
muito
professional
ideológicas
organizations
sendo
and found to
apontados
have
como
been
juízes.
not competent, are
Os não
substandard.
competentes.
And do you know that of the 50 people who President Trump appointed to the Court of Appeals for lifetime appointments, not one is black?
50
This is
apontados,
what
nenhum é
they've
negro.
been doing. You want to talk about packing a court? Let's have that discussion.
All right, thank you,
Não
Senator.
respondeu.
Let's go on and talk about the issue of racial justice.
I just want the record to reflect she never answered the question.
Ela não respondeu.
But the American people,
Thank
maybe
you.
the next debate, Joe Biden will answer the question.
Thank you,
But I think
thank
the
you.
American people know the answer.
Thank you, Vice President. In March, Breonna Taylor, a 26-year-old emergency room technician in
O
Louisville,
caso da
was
Breonna
shot and
Taylor,
killed after police
foi
officers
morta
executing a
depois de
search
uma
warrant
ação
in
de
a narcotics
mandados.
investigation broke into her apartment. The police said they identified themselves. Taylor's boyfriend said he didn't hear them do that.
A polícia
He
disse
used
que
a
eles se
gun registered to
identificaram.
him to fire a
O
shot,
namorado da
which
Breonna Taylor
wounded
disse
an
que ele
officer.
ouviu
The
atirar,
officers
ele
then fired
atirou
more than 20 rounds into the apartment. They
e
say they
se
were
atirou de
acting
volta.
in self-defense.
Que atuaram,
None of them
disseram
have
que
been
atuaram
indicted
em
in
defesa
connection with
própria.
her death. Senator Harris,
Acabaram
in
matando a
the
Breonna
case
Taylor.
of Breonna Taylor, was justice done?
O caso da Breonna Taylor foi feita a justiça? É
I
uma
don't
pergunta
think so.
complicada.
And I've talked
Diz que
with
não.
Brianna's mother, Tamika Palmer.
Complicado, porque ela diz que o sistema de justiça norte-americano não funciona,
And
cara.
her family deserves
pesado.
justice. She was a beautiful young woman.
A família,
She
ela
had
disse que a
as her
família
life
merece
goal to become
justiça.
a nurse, and she wanted to become an
Embora a
EMT
família tenha ganhado
first
milhões de
learn
dólares no
what's
acordo
going
com
on
a justiça
out on
local.
the street, so she could then
Kentucky, se não me engano.
become a nurse and save lives. And her life was taken
A vida dela foi
unjustifiably and tragically and violently.
trágico.
And it just it brings me to, you know, the 8 minutes and 46 seconds that America witnessed,
8 minutos que
during which
a América
an
viu
American man
George
was
Floyd
tortured
foi
and
torturado
killed
pelo
under the
policial.
knee of an armed, uniformed police officer.
Só que a
And
polícia, hein?
people around our country, of every race, of every age, of every gender, perfect strangers to each other, marched
Milhares de
shoulder to shoulder, arm in arm,
marcharam lado a lado,
fighting for us to finally achieve that ideal.
Esse movimento dos ombros dela.
And I was a part of those peaceful protests.
Em que os americanos
I believe
marcharam
strongly that, first of
pacificamente.
all, we are never going to condone violence, but we always must fight for the values that we hold dear, including the fight to achieve our
Apoiariam
ideals.
violência,
And
mas
that's why
deve
Joe
ficar claro os
Biden and I
valores
have
que eles
said on
defendem.
this subject. Look, and I'm a former career prosecutor. I know what I'm talking about. Bad cops are bad for good cops. We need
Maus policiais são ruins para policiais bons.
policing in America and our criminal
De
justice
reforma da
system, which is why
justiça da
Joe and
polícia.
I will immediately ban chokeholds and carotid holds. George Floyd would be alive today if we did that. We will require a
Vai
national
banir algumas
register
técnicas.
for police officers who break the law. We will, on the issue of criminal justice reform,
Reforma
get rid of
criminal.
private prisons and cash
Acabar com
bail.
as
And we will
prisões
decriminalize
privadas
marijuana.
e a
And
fiança
we
e
will
descriminalizar a maconha.
expunge the records of those who have
Thank you,
been
Senator
convicted
Harris.
of marijuana. This is
Thank
a
you,
time
Senator
for
Harris.
leadership on a tragic issue
Senator Harris,
of
your time
unarmed
is up.
black people in America who
Thank
have
you,
been killed.
Senator Harris. Vice President Pence, let me pose the same question to you.
Eu pergunto ao
In the
Pence,
case of Breonna Taylor,
as Breonna
was
Taylor,
justice done? You
justiça foi
have 2
feita?
minutes uninterrupted.
Well, our heart breaks for the loss of any innocent American life. And the family of Breonna Taylor has our sympathies. But I trust our justice system.
Eu
A
acredito
grand
no sistema
jury
de
refused the evidence. And
É
it
muito
really
foi
is
do júri,
remarkable
né?
that as a former prosecutor,
E é
you would
impressionante que ela,
assume that an
como
impaneled grand jury looking at all the evidence got it wrong.
ela como procuradora, que um júri poderia dizer que fez errado, né?
I think, look, and with
Realmente.
regard to George Floyd, there's no excuse for what happened to George Floyd.
O George Floyd não é desculpa,
Justice will be served.
a justiça vai acontecer.
But there's also no excuse for the rioting and
Também não há
looting.
desculpas para sublevações que ocorreram em nome dele
Flora
depois.
Westbrook
Né?
is with us here tonight in Salt Lake City. Just a few weeks ago, I stood at what used to be her salon.
Encontrou
It was
uma pessoa
burned
que
to the ground
teve o
by
salão
rioters
queimado.
and looters.
Saltantes,
and Flora
né?
is still trying to put her life back
Revoltosos.
together. And I must tell you, this presumption that you hear consistently from Joe Biden and Kamala Harris that America is systemically racist.
Os
And that,
assuntos
as
de
Joe
América
Biden
é
said, that he
sistemicamente
believes that
racista. Eu
law
acredito
enforcement
que
has an implicit bias
forças
against
de
minorities
polícia têm um viés contra minorias.
is a great insult to the men and women who serve in law enforcement. And I want everyone to know who puts on the
Servem, né?
uniform of law enforcement every day.
Uma
President
mosca
Trump
sentou na cabeça
stand
dele.
with you.
E Trump tá
It
junto com
is
os policiais.
remarkable
Não dá
that
para não
when
deixar de
Senator
ver a
Tim
música.
Scott tried to pass a police reform bill,
Quando o senador
brought
negro
together a group of
norte-americano
Republicans
republicano
and
tentou
Democrats,
passar
Senator
uma
Harris,
reforma,
you got up and walked out of the room.
uma reforma
And then you
da polícia,
filibustered Senator
eles
Tim
travaram
Scott's bill
o
on the Senate floor that would have provided new
projeto
accountability, new
em Scott.
resources. Look, we don't have to choose between supporting law enforcement, improving public safety, and supporting our African American
Thank you,
neighbors
Vice
and all of our
Eles não
minorities.
precisam
Under
escolher
President
entre
Trump's
apoiar a polícia ou
leadership,
apoiar os
always
negros.
stand with law enforcement and will do what we've done
Vice
Eles
President
apoiarão a
Pence, thank you.
polícia
Your time
improve
is
the
up.
lives of
e fazer
African
o possível
Americans,
para melhorar a
Thank you,
vida dos
Vice
negros
President.
norte-americanos.
record
Vice
investments in
President Pence, your time
education,
is
and will
up.
fight for school choice for all of our members.
Thank you, Vice
I'd
President.
like to respond.
Senator Harris.
I will not sit here and be lectured by the Vice President on what it means to enforce the laws of our country. I am the only one on this stage
Ela
who
disse
was
que não vai
personally prosecuted. Everything from child sexual
tomar uma
assault to
lição
homicide.
do Pence, que
I'm
ela
the
foi
only one on
procuradora,
this
que ela
stage
sabe, ela é a
prosecuted
única
the
que
big
sabe o que é
banks
isso.
for taking advantage of America's homeowners. I'm the only
Processou
one on this
bancos,
stage
processou
who
criminal.
prosecuted for-profit colleges for taking advantage of our veterans. And the reality of this is that we are talking about an election in 27 days, where last week the
Tá falando de uma
President of the
eleição em
United
27
States
dias
took
que
a
na última
debate stage
semana
in front of 70
foi,
million Americans
o
and
presidente foi ao
refused
debate
to condemn white
recusou
supremacists.
a condenar os supremacistas brancos.
It wasn't like
Pence
he
dizendo
didn't
que não é
have a
verdade.
chance. He didn't
Não é como
do
se ele
it,
não
and then
tivesse
he
uma chance, que ele não
double-checked.
disse isso.
And then he
Ele não
said,
condenou.
when pressed, stand back, stand by.
Ele disse stand back, stand by.
This is a
Que
part
é um significado
of
meio
the
de
pattern.
segure, né?
Donald
Assim,
Trump's.
prepare-se, né?
He called Mexicans
Ele disse que
racists
chamou
and
mexicanos de
He instituted as his first
estupradores, que não é
act a
verdade.
Muslim ban.
Não é
He,
verdade.
on the issue of
Ele baniu
Charlottesville,
muçulmanos, não é
where people were
verdade.
peacefully protesting the need for racial justice, where a young woman was killed,
Tá
and
dizendo
on the other side there were
protestos
neo-Nazis
em
carrying
Charlottesville que
tiki
tinham
torches, shouting racial
neonazistas,
epithets, anti-Semitic
semitismo,
slurs, and Donald Trump,
e
when
que o
asked
Trump
about it, said
disse
there were
que a
fine
outra
people
mentira
on both sides.
é
This is who we have
boas
as the
pessoas dos
president
dois
of the
lados,
United
né?
States.
Isso é uma
In
mentira já
America, you deserve
comprovada.
better. Joe Biden will be a president who
Eu,
brings
até
our
dizendo agora que
country
o Biden vai
together
unir de novo o país.
and recognizes the beauty in our diversity and the fact that we
Senator
all
Harris,
have
thank
so
you.
much more in common than what separates us.
Vice President Pence, let me give you a minute to respond.
Thank you, Susan. I appreciate that very much. You know, I think this is one of the things that makes people dislike the media so much in this country, Susan.
Das coisas que
We
desgostam da mídia.
selectively edit, just like Senator Harris did.
Edição editada.
Comments that
Edição
President
editada,
Trump and I
edição,
and
né?
others
É bem
on our side of the aisle make. I mean, Senator
recortado.
Harris conveniently omitted after the president made comments about people on either side of the debate over monuments, he condemned the KKK, neo-Nazis, and white supremacists.
Condenou o
He's done so
KKK, os supremacistas
repeatedly.
brancos e
You're concerned that he doesn't condemn
repetidamente
neo-Nazis.
esses
President
neonazistas e
Trump
tudo
has
mais.
Jewish grandchildren. His daughter and son-in-law are Jewish.
Trump tem netos
This is a president
judeus.
who respects and cherishes all of the American people.
Ele
But you
respeita
talk
todos os
about having
americanos.
personally prosecuted. I'm glad you brought up your record, Senator.
Thank you.
But I really need to make this point. When you were DA in
Ela
San
foi
Francisco,
procuradora.
when you left office, African Americans were 19 times more likely to be
Africanos
prosecuted for
eram
minor
19 vezes
offenses than
mais
whites and Hispanics.
mais chance de ser
When
preso
you were
do que
Attorney
outros,
General of
outras
California,
pessoas.
Thank you,
you
Vice President.
increased the disproportionate incarceration of
Ela
blacks
aumentou
in California.
o encarceramento de
You did
negros na
nothing on
Califórnia.
criminal justice reform in
Fez nada na
California.
reforma na
You didn't lift
Califórnia.
a finger
Thank
to
you.
pass the First Step Act on Capitol Hill. I mean, the reality is your record speaks
you,
for
Vice
itself.
President
President
Pence.
Trump and I have fought for criminal justice reform.
Thank you, Vice President
We fought for
Pence.
educational choice and opportunities for African Americans, all of our
Eles
Thank you,
votaram
sir.
por
And we'll do it for full.
Thank you.
afro-americanos.
You know, there is no more important issue than the final issue that we're going to talk about tonight, and that is the issue of the election
But
itself.
Susan, he attacked my record. I would like an opportunity to respond.
Let me give you 30 seconds because we're running out of
I
time.
appreciate that. First of
O
all,
histórico dele tá,
having
ele conseguiu
served
tempo para
as the Attorney General of the state of California, the work that I did is a model of what our nation needs to do.
o trabalho
And we
dela.
will
Deve
be
ser
able to
modelo,
do
nossa.
under a Joe Biden presidency.
Huge.
Our agenda includes what this administration has failed to do. It will be about not only instituting a ban on chokeholds and carotid holes,
Thank you.
not only,
Thank you, Senator
I would
Harris.
like to go through,
These are points that you made earlier in the hour, and I want to talk about the election itself before we have to.
but I want to talk about the connection between what Joe and I will do and my record, which includes, I was the first
A
statewide
primeira
officer to institute a requirement that my agents would wear body cameras and keep
e
them on full time.
requisitassem
We
a
were
câmera
the
de
first
corpo de
to initiate
policiais,
a requirement that there would be a
Primeiros
training
que
for law enforcement on implicit bias because
visitassem
yes, Joe Biden
treinamentos.
and I recognize that implicit bias does exist, Mr. Vice President.
Ela disse que
contrary to what you
reconhece
may
que
believe.
há
We did the
viés
work
implícito na
of
polícia
instituting reforms that
contra
were about
minorias.
investing in reentry. This is the work that we have done and the work we will do going forward. And again, I will not be lectured by the Vice
Não vai
President
tomar uma lição do vice-presidente.
On
Nossa,
our
meu
record.
Deus.
of what we have done in terms of law enforcement and keeping our communities safe
Ridículo.
and a commitment
Ela não
to
respondeu as
reforming
questões que ele
criminal
falou,
justice
de
system movement.
Thank
ter
you,
prendido mais
Senator Harris.
negros e
I'd like
tal,
to pose the
quando ela foi
I'd
procuradora.
like you to respond first to the question on our final topic, the election itself.
Tópico, a eleição em si mesmo.
President Trump has several times refused to commit himself
Trump
to
se
a peaceful
recusou
transfer of power after the election.
a comprometer com uma transição
And President Trump
pacífica.
refuses to accept a peaceful transfer of power. What steps would you and Vice President Biden then take? What would happen?
Passos eles tomariam, né, medidas eles tomariam se o Trump se negar a transferir o poder.
So I'll tell you, Joe and I are
Ridículo essa questão.
particularly
Ridículo.
proud of the coalition that we've built around our campaign. We probably have one of the broadest coalitions of
Orgulhosos
voters
da
that you've
coalizão
ever
que
seen
eles
in a
uniram.
presidential race. Of course, we have the support of Democrats, but also independents and Republicans. In fact, 7 members of President George W. Bush's cabinet are supporting our
7 membros do Ministério do
we
Bush
have the
apoiam o
support
Biden.
of
Apoiam o Biden.
Colin Powell, Cindy McCain, John Kasich, over 500
Republicanos liberais apoiam o Biden.
generals, retired generals, and former national security experts and advisors are supporting our campaign. And I believe they are doing that because they know that Joe Biden has a deep, deep-seated commitment to fight for our democracy.
Biden,
And to fight for the
acredito que o Biden
integrity
luta
of
pela
our democracy
democracia
and
e
to
pela
bring
integridade
integrity
dela.
back to the White House. And so we believe in the American people. We believe in our democracy.
Eles
And
acreditam
here's
no povo
what I'd like
americano e
to
na
say to everybody.
democracia.
Vote. Please vote. Vote
Pedindo para
early.
votar.
Come up with a plan to vote. Go to iwillvote.com. You can also go to joebiden.com. We have it within our power in these next 27 days to make the decision about what will be the course of our country for the next 4 years. And it is within our power, and if we use our vote and we use our voice, we will win. And we will not let anyone subvert our democracy with what Donald Trump has been doing, as he did on the debate stage last week, when again in front of 70 million people,
Eles vão assegurar a democracia que o Trump
attempted to suppress the vote.
se
Joe Biden, on the
tentou
other hand,
suprimir o
on that
voto.
same debate stage, because clearly
Eu sei
Donald Trump
que
doesn't think he can run on a record because it's a failed record. Joe Biden on that stage said, "Hey, just please vote." So I'll
Joe
repeat
Biden
what Joe
falou
said.
só
Please
vote.
vote.
Thank you, Senator. Vice President Pence, President Trump has several times refused to commit himself to a peaceful transfer of
Mesma
power
pergunta.
after the election. If Vice President Biden is declared the winner and President Trump refuses
Trump
to
for
accept a
considerado
peaceful transfer of power,
curioso.
what would be your role and
Qual seria o
responsibility
seu papel
as
e
Vice
responsabilidade como
President? What would you
vice-presidente?
personally
Trump se
do?
negar a
You have
transferir
2
algo.
minutes.
Well, Susan, first and foremost, I think we're going to win this election.
Eu acho que nós vamos ganhar
Because
essa eleição.
while Joe Biden and Kamala Harris rattle off a long litany of the establishment in Washington, D.C., an establishment that Joe Biden's been a part of for 47 years, President Donald Trump has launched a movement of everyday Americans from every walk of life.
Tem um movimento do
I have every
povo comum,
confidence that the same
enquanto que o
Americans
Biden e a
that
América,
voted for
Biden e a Harris têm
2016,
apoio do establishment.
They see this president's record where we rebuild our military. We revived our economy through tax cuts and rolling back regulations, fighting
A
for
administração
fair trade,
recuperou
unleashing American energy.
os
We appointed
militares,
conservatives to our federal courts at every level. And we stood with the men and women.
recuperar a
who fought
economia,
for us.
apontar o juiz
And
conservador.
I think that movement of Americans has only grown stronger in the last
Esse movimento que apoia
When you talk about accepting the outcome of the election,
sobre aceitar o fim da eleição.
I must tell you, Senator, your party has spent the last 3.5 years trying to overturn the results of the last election.
E o Partido Democrata tentou reverter o
When Joe
resultado da
Biden was
última
vice
eleição.
president of the United States, the FBI actually spied on President
E
Trump.
quando o
and our
Biden era
campaign.
vice-presidente, o
I mean,
FBI
there were documents
espionou
released this week that the CIA actually made a referral
a campanha
to
do,
the
do
FBI
Trump.
documenting that those allegations
Saiu
were coming
recente,
from the
né?
Hillary Clinton campaign. And of course, we've all seen the avalanche, what you put the country through for the better part of 3 years until it was found that there was no obstruction, no collusion, case closed. And then Senator Harris, you and your colleagues in the
Essa invenção da
Congress tried to
deferência
impeach the
suposta
President of the United States over the
coligação
phone
entre
call.
a
And
Rússia
now
e
Hillary
os.
Clinton has actually said to Joe Biden that in her words, under no circumstances should he concede the election. So
Que a Hillary Clinton falou que, sob nenhuma circunstância, o Biden deveria aceitar o resultado. Eles estão lutando em cortes para evitar que os democratas mudem as regras no meio do processo eleitoral. Eleição pelos Correios.
We know we're going to have confidence in it, and I believe in all my heart that President Donald Trump's going to be reelected for 4 more years.
You know, I've written all the questions that I've asked tonight, but for the final question of the debate,
Última
I'd like
questão.
to read a question that someone else wrote. The Utah Debate Commission asked students in the state to write essays about what they would like to ask you. And I want to close tonight's debate with the question posed
Última
by
pergunta.
Brecklin Brown. She's
Aluno
an
de
8th grader at Springville Junior High in
Colégio
Springville, Utah. And here's
Utah.
what she wrote, quote, "When I watch the news, all I see is arguing between Democrats and Republicans.
Tudo
When
que
I
eu vejo no
watch the
noticiário,
news, all
só
I
discussão
see
entre
is
republicanos e
citizen
democratas.
fighting against citizen.
É cidadão com
When I watch
cidadão.
the news, all I see are 2 candidates from opposing parties
Vejo
trying
dois
to tear each
candidatos
other
de
down.
partidos opostos
If our
tentando se
leaders can't
destruir.
get along,
nossos
How are the
líderes
citizens supposed to get along?
estão
And
bem,
then she
como
added,
os cidadãos se dão
your
bem.
examples could make all the difference
Os
to
exemplos
bring
podem
us
fazer toda a
together.
diferença de fazer
So to each of you in turn, I'd like you to take 1 minute and respond
um
to
minuto.
Brecklin. Vice President Pence, you have 1 minute.
Brecklin, it's a wonderful question. And let me just commend you for taking an interest in public life. I started following the news when I was very young. And in America, we believe in a free and open exchange of debate.
Começou a seguir política muito cedo, que nos Estados Unidos eles
It's how we've
acreditam na
created literally the freest and most prosperous nation.
liberdade de diálogo e
But I would tell you
liberdade de
that
expressão.
don't assume that what you're seeing on your local news networks is synonymous with the American people.
Não tome o que já vê na mídia com o que ocorre na vida americana mesmo.
Late Justice
real.
who we just lost from the Supreme Court, and the late Justice Antonin Scalia. They were on polar
Ela pegou o
opposites
exemplo do
on the
Scalia,
Supreme Court of the
da
United States.
juíza que morreu
One very
agora.
liberal, one very conservative.
Eles tinham posições
But what's
muito
been learned since
antagônicas.
her passing was the two of them and their families.
Eles, no entanto, se davam muito bem e eram
And
amigos.
here in America, we can disagree. We can
E aqui
debate
nos Estados
vigorously, as
Unidos,
Senator Harris and I have on
Vocês
this
podem
stage
discordar, vocês podem debater.
tonight. But when the debate is over, we
Quando o
come
debate
together as
acaba,
Americans. And that's
se
what
unem
people
como
do in big
americanos.
cities and small towns all across this country.
Acontece nos
So
Estados Unidos
I just
inteiro.
want to encourage you, Brecklin. I want to tell you that we're going to work every day to have government as good as our people. And the American
Mostrar para ter
people
governo
each
tão
and
bom quanto a
every
população.
day love a good debate. We love a good argument. But
Às
we
vezes,
always come together.
gosta de um bom debate,
always there
sempre se
for
une
Thank you.
in times of
Estão lá
need.
quando
Especially learned that
o outro, no momento de
Thank you.
through the
necessidade.
difficulties of this year.
Senator Harris, what would you say to Brecklin?
First of all, I love hearing from our young leaders. And when I hear her words, when I hear your words, Brecklin, I know our future is bright because it is that perspective on who we are and who we should be that is a sign of leadership and is something we should all aspire to be. And that, that brings me to Joe. Joe Biden, one of the reasons that Joe
É
decided
isso que ela perguntou.
for president is
Lembra
after
Joe Biden, que
Charlottesville, which we talked about earlier.
foi depois de
It so
Charlottesville,
troubled him, and it
supostamente
upset him
naquele
like it
dia.
did all of us, that
Foi
there
tão
was that kind of
preocupante
hate and
e ódio
division. What propelled Joe to
que
run for
levou ele
president was to see that over the
candidatar.
course of the last 4 years, what Brecklin described has been happening. Joe has a long-standing reputation of working across the aisle and working in a
Bastante a
bipartisan
reputação de trabalhar com os dois
and that's
partidos.
what he's going to do as president.
E é isso que ele vai fazer como
Joe
presidente.
Biden has a history of lifting people up and fighting for their dignity. You mean you
História
have to
de
know
ter-
Joe's story to know that Joe has known pain,
Levantar os espíritos das
he's known
pessoas. Né?
suffering,
Sabe o que é
he has known
sofrimento,
love.
o que é dor, sabe o que é amor.
and so Brecklin, when you think about the future, I do believe the future is bright,
Eu acredito que o futuro
and
é
it will be because of your leadership,
claro, né?
and it will be
Pro melhor.
because we fight for each person's voice
Eles
through their
lutam
vote, and we get engaged
pelas
in this
vozes
election
de cada
because
pelo voto.
you have the ability through your work and through eventually your vote
Thank you,
to
Senator
determine
Harris.
the future of our
Ela pode
country
determinar o
and what
futuro
its leaders
do país. Só do
Thank you,
Brasil, que do
Senator
país.
Harris. Thank you, Vice President Pence. Thank you so much for being with us tonight. We want to thank also the University of Utah for its hospitality, and most of all, our thanks to all the Americans who
Agradecendo.
watched this debate tonight.
Universidade de Utah, que
Again,
cedeu
our best
espaço.
wishes for a quick recovery to President Trump, the First Lady, and
Desejo melhor
everyone
para a
who is battling
primeira-dama, o
COVID.
presidente.
The second presidential debate is next week on October 15th, a
Próximo
town hall-style
debate,
debate in Miami. We
dia
hope you'll join
15.
us then. Good evening.
Flórida. Bom, acabou o debate. Um debate bem mais civilizado. Eu acho que o Pence deu uns bons ataques aí na Harris, na campanha do Biden. Acho que ele saiu muito bem, muito bem na questão da justiça, né, da Suprema Corte, questão da... Ele perguntou diretamente se vocês iam aumentar a quantidade de juízes, ela não respondeu pelo menos 2 ou 3 vezes, ele fez questão de pontuar. Mesmo na questão racial, acho que ele saiu muito bem. lembrando que o Trump já tinha renegado, né, essas questões todas aí de supremacia branca, nazismo, KKK, etc. Eu acho que ele falou bem da recuperação econômica. A Harris realmente causa até assim, um certo nojo, né, porque ela repetiu mentiras que já foram desmentidas sucessivamente várias vezes ao longo de anos, né? A mais recente aí que o Trump teria falado mal, xingado, né, os veteranos mortos da Primeira Guerra Mundial, teria atacado veteranos que estão vivos por aí, o que já foi desmentido, já foi desmentido que ele não disse que neonazistas eram pessoas boas, né, dos dois lados, que ele estava se referindo era um outro protesto que estava acontecendo ao mesmo tempo, né, entre pessoas que estavam apoiando a manutenção das suas tradições locais, que implicava também os símbolos da confederação, mas não eram, né, pessoas neonazistas nem nada do gênero, e os outros, né, demonstradores democratas e tal, mais progressistas, que estavam ali protestando também pacificamente contra isso, tudo até aí normal, quando chegaram os neonazistas, os supremacistas brancos e tal, e que aí rolou o confronto, essas pessoas chegou até, como ela disse, ela chegou a mencionar, né, matou, até uma pessoa chegou a morrer por conta dos confrontos. E aí o Trump condenou a supremacia branca, condenou tudo isso, falou que o racismo não tinha lugar nos Estados Unidos, não tinha lugar, né, não tinha espaço, né, na vida americana. Mas ele comentou essa outra frase se referindo a esses dois outros grupos, né, pacíficos que protestavam. Tinham pessoas boas de cada lado e a mídia recortou, né, editou e colocou como se ele tivesse se referindo aos, né, esse grupo neonazista, supremacista branco, etc. Que é uma mentira. Ela mentiu acerca dos dados, né, de emprego, acerca da economia, como se, né, fosse culpa do Trump a pandemia. E aí, como eu até disse antes, né, ela jogou com a carta do coronavírus, né, que o Trump falhou miseravelmente e tal, tentou imputar, deu para perceber claramente, tentou imputar no Pence, né, uma vibe de anti-ciência. Ela tentou fazer de modo implícito, depois foi explícito, porque ele é muito cristão, muito religioso, então já imaginava que ia ter também algum ataque desse gênero, mas ele saiu muito bem. Eu acho que foi um debate que os republicanos conseguiram mostrar muito melhor sua plataforma, o Pence conseguiu mostrar muito melhor a plataforma do seu partido, do Trump, do que o próprio Trump, né? Ele se expressa melhor, de modo mais calmo, mais pausado, fala, né, num tom tranquilo, não se exaltou, apesar de ter cortado algumas vezes a Harris, mas ele cortou justamente nas mentiras, né? E aí depois de ter sido chamado a atenção, ele acabou utilizando o tempo, né, de outras perguntas para responder as questões, né, que ele se opunha. Foi claríssimo na sua posição pró-vida e acabou colocando, né, a Harris na posição, obviamente, de pró-aborto. E eu fiquei impressionado, né, de ela dizer que legalizaria, descriminalizaria o uso da maconha, né, que é algo que já acontece, já foi descriminalizado na Califórnia e em outros estados, então passaria legislação para isso. Quando, no mesmo, né, pouco tempo antes, que eram pessoas religiosas estão tentando conseguir o apoio de moderados independentes, né, que têm suas convicções religiosas, que essas posições religiosas acabam também levando a uma postura, né, costumes mais conservadores contra as drogas, né. Não conseguiu responder acerca das acusações que o Pence fez contra o histórico dela enquanto procuradora da Califórnia, ter prendido mais negros, né, 19 vezes mais chance de ser preso um negro do que outros grupos étnicos enquanto ela foi procuradora. O sistema carcerário aumentou enormemente e tal. Então eu acho que o Pence venceu claramente esse debate, se impôs energicamente, mas respeitosamente. Eu acho que esse final foi muito sintomático aí da posição dos dois partidos, né? O Pence claramente colocou, né, assim, finalizou com um discurso pró-União, né, dizendo que ali acabou o debate, tá tudo certo, né, vão voltar a conversar e tal, não sei o que, vai ser civilizado, enquanto ela apontou questões partidárias, né, então ela fala de união e termina falando do próprio partido, termina implicitamente voltando à acusação de que o Trump é racista, retomando Charlottesville, e então fica um discurso vazio de união, enquanto o discurso do Pence para mim foi bem mais concreto nesse sentido, né? Dizer, ó, aqui a gente acredita na liberdade de expressão, na troca de ideias livre e, enfim, a gente discute, debate, mas a gente se une nos momentos de necessidade. Eu acho que foi bem mais bonito nesse sentido. Acho que o Pence falou muito bem. Eu acho que ele poderia ter falado muito melhor de política externa. Foi um vacilo da Harris, assim, ter falado mal da retirada do porto do Irã. Claramente foi algo muito positivo para os Estados Unidos. E que, enfim, Trump, durante a presidência do Trump, a política externa talvez seja uma das melhores coisas que ele fez, né? O histórico da política externa é muito positivo. Acabou com o ISIS, acabou com a confusão no Oriente Médio, progressivamente tirando tropas, embora não tenha conseguido, né? Ele promete retirar tudo no próximo mandato, embora diminuiu o efetivo no Iraque, diminuiu o efetivo no Afeganistão, conseguiu fazer com que os aliados da OTAN pagassem mais, coisas que não pagavam, que eu acho que é positivo para a própria aliança, né? Embora isso tenha causado desgaste, é bem verdade, mas é positivo para a própria aliança militar, que os seus membros paguem o que é disposto lá, acho que é 2% do PIB militar. As acusações, né, de que ele traria guerra foram sem base, porque ele é um presidente muito pacífico. Conseguiu o acordo, né, entre Israel, Bahrein e Emirados Árabes Unidos, né? Possivelmente com outros vindo aí, também conseguiu fazer lá, né, mediar o conflito entre Kosovo e a Sérvia. Então, a atuação do Trump é muito melhor e maior do que o Pence conseguiu defender. Ele acho que ele poderia ter sido muito melhor nisso, poderia ter ganhado muitos pontos aí, vamos dizer assim, né? E atacando a política desastrosa do governo Biden, que criou o ISIS, que criou a confusão na Líbia, né? Com essa política intervencionista ridícula, que o Trump se opôs. Ele perdeu a oportunidade, né, um prato cheio, de atacar o histórico das relações, né, com as relações exteriores do período do Biden e da Hillary Clinton como secretária de Estado. Eu acho que sobre a questão da China, nenhum dos dois foi lá muito assim, né? Você vê que a Harris se negou a caracterizar a China como inimiga adversária, mais o que, como também o próprio Pence, mas a posição do Pence e do Trump é muito mais clara, porque enfim, eles têm engajado, né, na guerra comercial. Acho que foi uma boa ele ter falado que o Biden sequer começou a guerra comercial, né, isso quer defender, portanto, os Estados Unidos. Quando ele ressaltou o acordo, né, a renegociação da NAFTA, acho que foi muito positivo. E eu acho que, no geral, efetivamente, os republicanos ganharam esse debate. A Harris não está no mesmo nível do Pence, não só, né, em termos de ideias, propostas claras, né? Foi claro um monte de coisa, do Green New Deal não foi claro, a questão da Supreme Court não foi claro, quanto o Pence foi. E eu acho que mesmo em preparação, então ela quis, acho que, ser muito assertiva, né? Querer fazer papel de mulher forte e tal, assertiva. E acho que acabou sendo muito mais grosseira do que ele manteve a calma o tempo todo, muito civilizado, um debate muito melhor, como eu disse, muito mais expositivo, propositivo do que o do Biden e do Trump, que é possível ocorra no dia 15, na semana que vem. Então é isso, agradeço e até a nossa próxima cobertura, a nossa próxima reação do debate presidencial. Esperamos que ocorra no dia 15, né, como previsto, que o Trump seja liberado pelos médicos, né, para poder fazer esse debate, que vai ser diferente, não vai ser nesse modelo, vai ser no modelo que chamamos de Town Hall, que é com pessoas comuns fazendo as perguntas, né, supostamente, normalmente, uma mistura dos três grupos, né, os decididos a votar nos republicanos, decididos a votar nos democratas e os indecisos, né. Então, normalmente é assim, mas há de ver quem vai organizar e como vai ser, porque o último Town Hall que aconteceu com o Biden, né, o Biden sendo entrevistado, sei lá quem organizou, a emissora que organizou, colocou gente que era pró-Biden, já tinha aparecido na TV em outros programas da mesma emissora, que era pró-Biden, como indeciso, ficou muito feio, né? Isso caiu logo foi desmascarado, que eles não tinham nada de indeciso. E ficou feio para a emissora, para o Biden, né? E nenhuma pergunta decente foi feita por Biden, só se um monte de bola levantada para ele cortar contra o Trump, ninguém arrochou ele sobre a política ambiental, que foi, acho que é importante lembrar, né? Ela reafirmou os pontos do Biden, só que o próprio Biden fez um flip-flop em termos de política ambiental. Isso eu já mencionei no outro vídeo, né, do primeiro debate. Ora, ele disse que era baniria o fracking, e o Pence ainda lembrou um outro vídeo que ele fala diretamente para um eleitor, uma eleitora jovem. Eu garanto para você que eu vou acabar com combustíveis fósseis, né? Aí quando vem a campanha, ele vem e diz que não é bem assim, eu não vou acabar de uma vez com fracking, nem com combustíveis fósseis, então ficou um flip-flop. Os americanos não gostam muito disso, né? Mas enfim, essa eleição é muito acirrada, muito anti-Trump, né? Mais do que propositiva, mas eu acho que ainda assim foi um debate muito bacana de acompanhar